call this meeting of Township High School District 211 Board of Education to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Cavill.
Here.
Mr. Kramer.
Here.
Mr. Dombrowski. Mrs. Klinkowitz.
Here.
Mr. Rosenblum.
Here.
Mr. Young.
Here.
Mr. Lefevre.
Here. Would everyone please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first item of business tonight, the board will enter closed session to discuss minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, matter relating to an individual student, and probable or imminent litigation against, affecting, or on behalf of the public body. Can someone please move there?
So moved.
Second. Roll call, please.
Ms. Cavill.
Aye.
Mr. Kramer.
Aye.
Mrs. Klinkowitz.
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre.
Aye.
So you might be
Come back to order. We'll continue on with this evening's meeting. Thank you for joining us tonight. The board has heard from a large number of individuals, and we value your input, whether via email, telephone, or in person. 4 years ago, we had a similar series of meetings, and we heard from many individuals. Many of the messages the board received are similar to the messages sent to the board 4 years ago. The board has numerous items on our agenda this evening to conduct the business of the district. As board president and pursuant to board policy BDDH, I directed our superintendent, Dr. Cates, to prepare the agenda in such a way to limit the number of individuals who will be recognized to speak. I directed Dr. Cates to publish information so that all citizens interested in appearing before the board would be aware of the procedures surrounding citizen appearances this evening. The parameters for the citizens' appearances this evening were published on the district website more than 48 hours prior to the meeting, were set forth in the agenda for this evening's meeting, and have been provided to each individual entering our meeting this evening. Once the citizens' appearances portion of the meeting begins, we will listen to general comments for 1 hour and then move on to the next item on our agenda, the public hearing on the 2019-2020 budget. Each person entering the meeting this evening who was interested in addressing the board drew a number. This number established the order of people who might address the board. If you are not called, we invite you to provide written comments to the board or to speak at another board meeting. Each person called will be granted 3 minutes so that we can be sure to hear people's key ideas while allowing more people the opportunity to address the board. A timer is viewable in front of Mr. Kovac, and he will issue the speaker a notification when 1 minute remains. This is an open public meeting, and appearances before the board are open to anyone of the public. I want to be sure that everyone understands that the public participation is not a dialogue. Board members will not answer questions or respond to speakers' comments during citizens' appearances. Thank you.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion.
Please.
My motion is this. I move that the board president remove the total time limit for public comments, and secondly, that the agenda items which are not time sensitive be tabled to be taken up at either time, at either the next scheduled board meeting or special board meeting. My intention here is to not limit speech. I'm a retired military officer who swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, including the First Amendment, free speech, and I believe that that policy, your decision, limits free speech.
Does someone want to second that?
I'll second that.
Okay. So here is the question for the board. Mr. Kramer is moving that the board president remove the time limit for public comments, number one, and second, that agenda items which are not time sensitive be tabled to then be taken up at either the next scheduled board meeting or a special board meeting. That is the question for the board. Mr. Kramer, discussion.
If I may, just to explain my thoughts, I believe that the rules that have been posted are not compliant with the board policy that you specified, a policy which was last revised 22 years ago. Specifically, the policy states that the board may limit the public discussion. In this case, the public's notification seems to indicate that the superintendent is limiting public discussion. You answered that question in your opening remarks. I believe that you directed the superintendent as it is your authority to do so. Second, the policy specifies the board president reserves the right to limit the number of individuals or groups who will be recognized to speak. The rules posted for the meeting specify time limits, not the number of speakers, and is not in accordance with the BOE policy. That is the crux of my motion.
Anyone else?
I think we've been pretty clear about, having 60 minutes of presentation. The information has been put forward. I was here 4 years ago. We heard a lot of the comments. We've gotten a lot of the emails. I have read everything that I've received from all of our individuals. I believe as we go along, 60 minutes at 3 minutes a person, there's only so much information that can be given. I would say to leave it at the 60 minutes. If there's some kind of a pressing issue that I think somebody else might have, there's another opportunity at our next board meeting for individuals to come and speak.
I think the point being that if the board president would like to limit the number of speakers, if he was planning on an hour at 3 minutes per person, that would be 20 speakers. That would be well within his purview. But to leave it with a time cap, I would suggest then that the board policy should have been revised after the last session that we had 4 years ago.
Yeah, if you please, the cheering is not helpful to the board, and at this point, we're in the board discussion, so.
Did we allow people 5 minutes last time, or was it the 3?
We did 3 and we had 2 hours for both sessions.
Okay. And we heard a lot of input, and a lot of it was a repeat of
And
some of the items.
only 3 board members, which is a minority, myself, yourself, Mr. Lefevre, were present at that time, and I don't think it would be fair to the other members of the board to limit their exposure to the community input at this time. Just because we have experience doesn't necessarily mean that they have the same experience when making these decisions that we may have been purview to.
And that's a valid point, so we need to hear from the rest of the board members.
I think there are many different ways regarding freedom of speech. There are many different ways that people can give input. And I think there are several people who have already communicated their thoughts and ideas regarding the subject matter. I know I've read every single email that I've received. And I think that's one format. This is another format for people to be able to express their thoughts and ideas. I think I would like to, if the 60 minutes with 3 minutes apiece is 20 people, then perhaps we can have a motion to limit the number of people that speak this evening, still allowing people to send us their ideas and thoughts in other ways, and we still have another board meeting next month before we actually vote on this policy. So that gives people another opportunity and, quite frankly, another month to give us input. So I don't think we're limiting the opportunity of people to speak, be it electronically or otherwise.
Anyone else?
As a new board member, it is important to me that we follow our own policies. So if our policies say that we can limit the number of speakers, if that's what our policy says, versus a time cap, then that is what we should do. At the same time, it's not a fair assessment to say that just because myself and Mr. Kramer are new to the board that we're new to this issue either. So I'm sure, like every other board member here, I've read every email that I've gotten. I'll continue to do so. And that's what I have to say about this at this time.
I mean, I've read every email that we've gotten too, and I'm quite familiar with the subject. As I was in the audience for 4 years ago. I was in the audience 4 years ago when this matter came up. I would almost concur that maybe we should just limit the number of people as opposed to a time limit. I can go with that. 60 minutes, it is probably between 20 to 25 people that will be able to speak, but maybe we can increase that a little bit.
All right. Do you want to just vote on this motion and then make another one?
Mr. Make one final comment.
Sure.
I believe that anybody who traveled from near and far to this meeting should be able to speak at this meeting.
So the motion in front of the board we have. Is there anything else on this motion? Roll call, please.
What's the motion? What's the exact motion?
Excuse me, hang on a second. Ms. Simarusti, the motion, once again, is that the board president remove the time limit for all public comments, and second, that the agenda items which are not time-sensitive be tabled to be taken up at either the next scheduled board meeting or a special board meeting.
Ms. Lefevre, as it's my motion, if you would like to amend that and stipulate a number of people, that's your prerogative.
I appreciate that. I think the easiest way to continue with the business is to vote on this, and then we'll take another motion, if that's what someone wishes. Roll call, please.
Mr. Rosenblum,
No.
Mr. Kramer,
Yes.
Mrs. Kulkowitz,
No.
Mr. Young,
No.
Ms. Cavill,
No.
Mr. Dombrowski,
For policy, I vote yes.
Mr. Lefevre,
No. So this motion fails. Now, did someone want to make a motion limiting the exact number of people that we'll hear tonight?
I would like to make a motion that for this evening's open citizen comment section on this particular topic that's before us be limited to 25 individuals for 3 minutes each.
Rule of order, it's up to the board president to specify a number, not the board.
So the motion is to limit the number of individuals speaking tonight to 25 minutes, 25 people, and 3 minutes per person. Is that right?
Correct.
Would someone like to second that?
Second.
Discussion on this.
So this would then supersede the time limit cap, or does that still stand in addition to the number of speakers, to the point where if we reach the time limit cap before we reach the limit on the speakers, that would be upheld? Or I guess I'm confused because we haven't eliminated the time cap at this point.
Well, the time cap was noted, 25 people at 3 minutes. So that's your time cap right there.
So if it helps, I'll amend my motion.
I
to-
don't think that's necessary. I
Okay.
think it's clear. Are there any other questions? Any other discussion?
I would prefer that the board president stipulate a number rather than a board member. It's your responsibility.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Ms. Cavill?
Aye.
Mr. Creamer?
No.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye. All right. We are limited to 25 people at 3 minutes per person. Before we begin, Dr. Cates, do you have any preliminary remarks?
I do. Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Clear laws did not exist around the specific issue of transgender students and access to locker rooms 4 years ago. We have long recognized transgender identity and provided supports to transgender students, and we have also always considered the best way to serve all of our students surrounding access to our facilities. Tonight we are presenting a new proposal on this matter to our elected school board for its consideration. 4 years ago, our board at the time, they wanted to make this important decision. Even in the face of pressure from the Federal Office for Civil Rights seeking to mandate unrestricted locker room access for transgender students and lawsuits representing opposing viewpoints, the board and our administration considered all the issues very carefully. At that time, we listened to hours of individual comments, received hundreds of email messages, and engaged in informal conversations nearly everywhere we went. Importantly, the board engaged in many hours of discussion with each other and often debate, as each board member felt a great deal of responsibility for the community they were elected to serve. Ultimately, the board decided that our district should implement a practice of granting access to the locker room of a student's gender identity upon the student's agreement to change clothes in a private area within that locker room. We improved our locker rooms by adding several private changing stations and made them available to any student. For 4 years, we have implemented this practice without controversy or incident, and these changing rooms will remain in place. In our district of 12,000 students, less than a dozen students have identified as being transgender. To make this declaration is not easy. In fact, it can be extremely difficult. We believe more students may experience transgender identity but do not come forward because of how hard this can be. Transgender students are those who consistently assert a gender identity different from the birth gender. It is common that students can be at different stages of their transition during their 4 years of high school. Our student support team members work with each student and parent to create an individualized plan designed to be responsive to that student at whatever their stage of development and transition. Typical items of discussion include whether the family would like teachers, staff, and students to use a different name when referring to the individual than the name on the birth certificate, whether to change the gender classification in the student's records, and what pronouns the individual prefers. Each transgender student we know about has a support plan from an individualized support team. Some seek a private space and different accommodations, and others want to use the bathroom or locker room of their gender identity. These students access our bathrooms and locker rooms without notice or disruption because our student body demonstrates exemplary respect, acceptance, and tolerance. While our balanced compromise, providing access as long as private changing areas were used, has prevailed in the face of all challenges thus far, legal and otherwise, our society and community have advanced over the years. The proposed policy we are presenting provides for equal educational opportunities, without exception or condition, and without the restriction of private changing stalls that we have required transgender students to utilize for the past 4 years. The core of the policy was created by the Illinois Association of School Boards, and the policy has been adopted widely across the state of Illinois. We haven't heard of challenges or controversies associated with unrestricted access in districts across the state. As we all know, a lot can change in 4 years. In those 4 years, understanding and acceptance of transgender identity have advanced societally and in our immediate communities, and for the better. In our district and countless others, students, families, and staff recognize, honor, and respect differences, and our students do this best of all. We recognize that there are varying views on this issue, and anyone who is uncomfortable for any reason can seek support and alternatives. In a large high school district of nearly 12,000 students, we make hundreds of accommodations every day for students who experience a wide variety of individual differences. We are fortunate to have caring staff and excellent facilities with the ability to support a variety of needs. It is time that we take the next step forward. The new unrestricted policy will be presented to the board later this evening for its review and consideration. No action will be taken on this policy tonight, and the policy will be considered for action at our next board meeting. Thank you for what I know will be thoughtful and respectful comments, and for your support of this district and all our students.
Okay, that will bring us to the next item on our agenda, which is citizen appearances. In order to use our time efficiently, I will call 2 names at a time. The first individual will go directly to the podium and begin their remarks, while the second individual will come forward to the designated chair alongside Dr. Cronus, sitting for me behind the podium. We will continue this practice for a bit longer than the next hour, which is 25 people. Our first speaker this evening will be Lisa Casalino. I would also ask that John Jakalowski please prepare to be next.
Good evening. I am a parent with twin daughters who are freshmen at a District 211 school. I have spoken with each of them regarding this topic. They have no ill feelings at all towards other children who may have gender dysphoria or who may decide they feel like they identify as the opposite biological sex. In fact, they have a classmate who is trans and they simply don't care. They think that this particular student is nice. These days, bullying is more likely to have to do with not having the latest technology iPhone or some fashion trend. If this issue is brought to the next level to the left, where will it end? One of my daughters is hoping to play goalie in her chosen sport. Lacrosse has a position called the attack position. There are players who shoot goals to the goalie, and that's their designated position. What if an opponent is a biological male playing the attack position and shooting goals against her? We all know that the vast majority of males have more stature, muscle mass, and strength than females. It is simple biology. Will biological males who identify as biological males be allowed to enter girls' locker rooms? Male teachers? Fathers? It is inappropriate, and I'm here to represent the concerns that I have about my twin daughters' privacy affecting them, and along with the threat affecting women's sports. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, if you could, it will help to hear people without the cheering. We're trying to listen, and the cheering and the applause just gets in the way. Paul Dombrowski will be next, please.
John Jakowski.
John Jakowski, yes.
Okay. Thank you. I know it's not a dialogue, but bear with me. I'll ask some questions, but it's really more for food for thought. I think the first one is, how many of the ladies that are on the board when you were a young girl would have felt comfortable with a guy coming into your locker room? And how many dads here would feel comfortable with a guy coming into their daughter's locker room? Because that's what we're talking about. And
Hold up the signs, fine, but otherwise, please be quiet.
And like the woman said before me, where are you going to stop this? What keeps me from saying, today I feel like I'm a woman and I'm going to go into a woman's washroom? How are you going to police that? I don't think you can. So I firmly oppose this whole notion of making locker rooms and bathrooms accessible to the opposite sex when less than 1% of the population feels that day that they're not the sex that they are biologically. It's absurdity. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Paul Dombrowski to the podium. Donna Epton will be next.
My name is Paul Dombrowski. I'm a veteran educator. My husband and I are residents of Palatine Township and fierce advocates for LGBT youth. I am here tonight to strongly urge this school board to act in the best interest of transgender youth who have been brave enough to stand up for their basic rights, as well as the best interest of youths who may be not so brave or who have yet to enter this district. I am urging the board to allow for unrestricted locker room access for transgender youth. No more changing behind curtains, no more changing in dirty bathroom stalls. For over 30 years, I have been teaching my students, your children, to be kind, to be respectful, to learn about each other, to treat others as they wish to be treated, to listen to others' points of view, to embrace things that make us different, and to celebrate diversity. Unfortunately, the following statistics from the 2017 GLSEN School Climate Survey are a grim reality on what's going on in our schools today. The study shows for the first time in a decade, the victimization of LGBTQ youth is not decreasing at rates that previously have been seen, and has, in fact, gotten worse for transgender and gender nonconforming youth. The survey reports that more than a third of LGBTQ students missed at least one day of school in the last month because of feeling unsafe at school. Approximately 4 in 10 LGBT students avoid gender segregated spaces in school due to safety concerns. The frequency of verbal harassment on gender expression increased from 2015 to 2017 after years of decline. And there have been no improvements in the reports of physical harassment and assault based on gender expression. Truthfully, this issue doesn't seem to need much discussion. This isn't a political issue. This isn't a religious issue. It's an issue of equal rights. This issue is about fundamental fairness. The question is whether the district is going to be fair to students and demonstrate leadership by promoting acceptance. I urge the parents in this room tonight to ask themselves, what would I want for my child if they were transgender? Have a conversation with your children about compassion for others, tolerance and acceptance, and about celebrating our diversity. In a world that seems to be on the verge of exploding, the last thing we need to do right now is create more bigotry, intolerance, and division. As educators, as parents, as community members, as human beings, I urge you to foster tolerance and work towards acceptance for all.
Thank you. Donna Epton to the podium. Frank Skorsky on deck.
Good evening. I'm Donna Epton. I'm a retired educator from 211. I'm also a resident of the community. What I'd like to speak about for a few minutes this evening really reflects what Dr. Cates was talking about, how times change. I remember when I was a senior in high school in 1971, my sociology teacher took us to a state institution for people with disabilities. And I can still visualize a young man, a 12-year-old boy in a diaper, in a crib, with a wooden slat on the bottom, with poles on the side and the top as well, in a fetal position. That's how he spent his life. 10 or 15 years before I retired from 211, at Schaumburg High School, we had a program brought in for multiply challenged kids. And that young man that I saw that many years ago would have been in our school. Vastly different. He was treated with dignity, with respect. He was around others. He was safe. And so I've seen changes. When I was at, probably in the 1970s, late 70s at Schaumburg High School, we had a young man who was in theater, who was terrific. And he is now Alexandra Scott Billings, a noted actress in not only the Chicago area, but also on TV. I can't even imagine what Alexandra went through as a trans student at Schaumburg High School before it was socially acceptable. Thankfully, she has become quite successful and is married to her best friend from high school. And the last piece I'd like to expound upon is,
You have 1 minute left.
thanks. Actually, let me just finish up because I think hopefully my two examples about change are what's we're looking at today. Things have changed in our world. I think now is the time that District 211 needs to change. I'm perfectly comfortable with what the board is looking at so that our students, all students, have equal accessibility, are being treated with respect, kindness, and the dignity that all students deserve. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Frank Skorsky, you're up. Robin Walsh, on deck, please.
Where's that clock so I can keep track of my time? You won't have to call the police again. Where's the clock? Right there. Okay, great. I'm Frank Skorsky. I'm a 75-year-old guy, lived in Palatine 15 years, experienced everything in life but childbirth. I'm really, really disappointed with the decision to change a policy. I thoroughly agreed with what you guys decided to do 4 years ago. And by the way, Dr. Cates, I know you can't answer me, but when you were on Megyn Kelly, Fox News 4 years ago, you were on our side. I'd like to know what the heck's changed, but you can't answer me, so let's just move on. The bottom line is that 4 years ago, you guys made a decision to fight. And I like fighters. I mean, I'm a Bears fan, and I'm a Hawks fan. But I need a board of education, because by definition, that's what you are, educators, not indoctrinators, educators. And I'm having some issues here, because when this old man went to school, in fact, as recent as 20 years ago, the United States of America was #1 in education. The United States of America is now behind Saudi Arabia, Poland, Ireland, China. We are 26th. We spend more in Illinois on administration than any other school district in the state of Illinois, in the United States of America. And what are we getting? So first of all, I am against the policy. I want you to fight until you spend your last dollar. Number two, I want my tax dollars spent in the future, now and in the future, on education, not indoctrination. Spend my tax dollars fighting the current lawsuit. It's a good suit. Right now, the girls who are being abused by guys competing with them have Title IX suits all over the United States of America.
You have 1 minute left.
I can see. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I got a good eye, doctor. Anyway, so I want you to also ask for a change of venue, because the judge that we were in front of before was gotten rid of by our new Democratic governor, Pritzker. We now have a new judge. This new judge is prejudiced against us. This new judge said, come to court. We're going to fight. Come to court. He said that putting a barrier in a girls' locker room was similar to making a transgender compete in lane 6th in a swimming district. Well, this guy doesn't understand that when we have swim meets, there are no genitalia exposed. They have bathing suits. This guy has we got to get a change of venue and fight, fight, fight. What else? Oh, our rankings have gone to heck. This school is now number 135 in the state of Illinois.
Thank you. Robin Walsh, you're up. Gina Malk, you're on deck, please.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I got to speak 4 years ago. I got a low number again today. I feel like maybe I should go get a lottery ticket. Unlike some of the people in this room, I'm a 25-year resident of the district. Property owner for 22 years, my own home, so I paid money into this district. And I want to congratulate you and thank you for the change in this policy, or at least the proposed change. I'm a clinical psychologist registered in Illinois. I have worked with families, with adolescents, in the LGBT community, in the disabled community, with schools, and I must say that it's about time. When you make this change, you change from a discriminatory policy to equality, and you base your decision on behavior rather than on labels. I hope all of us here would rather be judged by our deeds than what religion we are, what race we are, where we come from. This is what we're talking about here. The opportunity to be free. I think it's what I've always admired about America, or at least what America has always aspired to, and I would like to see it again. I would like to see it come back to our lives, because it seems as though it's departed. I transitioned in 2014. It was not easy. I'm fairly privileged, but I had the opportunity to work with a community that has been devastated by the prejudice and racism. Now, I review the literature. I look at many of the documents, the latest research.
You have 1 minute left.
And I don't see trauma caused from trans inclusion into bathrooms. And I think, as Dr. Gates said, there have been no incidents. But I do see people in the community who are traumatized by the hate, by the rejection. In fact, before I came here tonight, there was a robocall in my home that identified transgender people as gender confused. It's very sad. I thought about the child that would have to listen to that and how that would affect them. Being hated, being rejected, lives with people. They internalize this and becomes self-hatred, internalized homophobia, internalized transphobia. It causes damage, even with the fact that beyond the suicide statistics, it robs people of a happy life. So I'm very encouraged and happy to hear about this policy, and I hope you vote for it. And I applaud you again
Your time
for
has
making
expired.
this change. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenna Malk, and on deck is Joseph Kwan.
Hi, I'm Jenna, and I go to a university in Wisconsin, and I actually drove 2 hours to come here because I was in the District 211, and this is very important to me. So, Title IX of the United States Education Amendment of 1972 prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex. Anyone with a high school degree level understanding of biology should know that sex and gender are more complex, and genetically speaking, there are a lot of variations of sex. For example, an intersex person may have both chromosomes, and their external genitalia is ambiguous appearing. Furthermore, Illinois has transgender rights anyways. 18 states and over 200 cities across the country have successfully passed and implemented laws protecting the LGBT community from discrimination in public accommodations, and there has been no increase in public safety incidents in bathrooms in those states, according to the National Center for Transgender Equality article. These no discrimination laws do not allow men to go into women's bathrooms. That claim allowing trans people into facilities of their identified gender is based on a flawed understanding of what it means to be trans or a misinterpretation of the law. They are not pedophiles or predators. They just want equality and to be seen as equal. They are people too, and they matter. They are trying to fit into an identity that they've longed for and fit into a society that keeps denying their equality. We need to help them feel as though they are a member of our society, our community, and our school. They are worthy of the same things any other student is worthy of, and they belong to be here just as much as they do. From what I've seen in the locker room, no one is purposefully looking around at each other. We're all changing and doing our own thing. I'm not looking for anything else except just to change and get out there. We need to educate students instead on what it means to be trans and what they go through, instead of ignoring them and bullying them. The opposing side says protect all students. And then let's do exactly that and protect all students, including transgender. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph Kwan is up, and Lori Kaplan-Singh is on deck, please.
Dear board members, my name is Joseph, I'm a resident in District 211 for more than 16 years. Just now, the young lady, Gina, I don't know, who just quoted, just tried to mention Title IX. I just want to quote Title IX because she doesn't know the details of Title IX. Okay. Title IX said, no person in the United States should, on basis of sex, be excluded from participation in by denied the benefits of or be subject to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. This is Title IX. It has something to do with sex, has nothing to do with sex orientation or gender identity. But unfortunately, in the new policy, it says that no student should, based on sex orientation, or gender identity, to be denied equal access to program activities, services, or benefits, or be limited in the exercise of any rights, privilege, advantage, or denied equal access to educational and extracurricular program and activities. Students should be treated and supposed in a manner consistent with their gender identity, which should include the students
You have 1 minute left.
having access to restroom, locker room, something like that. Okay. The new policy just biased Title IX, and no any current law supports any something like gender identity or sex orientation. I just want to recall what happened 4 years ago. Actually, it's on December the 3rd, 2015. In the afternoon, in Kona High School, where we have about 50 residents here say no agreement to ORC, which is federal government, Department of Education, or Federal Department, Office of Human Rights, Civil Rights.
Your time has expired, sir.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Lori Kaplan-Singh is up. Sue Johnson on deck, please.
Hello, my name is Lori Kaplan-Singh, and I'm the mother of a transgender student who just started college this year. My son actually went to elementary, middle, and high school in the new Trier school district. One of the most psychologically and physically difficult aspects of his early childhood, which really magnified his inner struggles with gender identity, was having to use the wrong bathroom at school. And his discomfort with having to use the girls' bathroom actually prevented him from using the bathroom all day. And as you can imagine, this led to a lot of physical discomfort. And this is not uncommon. I think it's a well-known fact that transgender individuals just avoid using restrooms in public places. And, you know, we were actually very fortunate because New Trier, our school district, understood the psychological need for my son to use a restroom and a locker room that matched his gender identity. And very happy to report that he did use the men's locker room and restroom throughout his high school years. There were no problems and there was no pushback from our very accepting community. And thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. Sue Johnson is up. Ava Tartarsuch, on deck, please.
Hello, my name is Sue Johnson, and I've lived in Palatine over 15 years. I had a child go through the school system. I'm disappointed in this policy. Let's take a step back to look at the board's potential policy change. The way this is worded implies that the board is singling out those struggling or confused about their sexual identity above all the other students. Let me be clear. All studies indicate that in America, those that struggle or identify as LGBT+ are at 1 to 2% of the population. Further, in August, Science magazine reports that a most comprehensive study conclusion of 400,000 participants in the UK, US, and Sweden indicate that there is no gay gene. The board has a safety and fairness obligation to protect the privacy of the other 98% of the student body. If those of faith and conscience disagree and avoid Target because of their liberal bathroom policy, how much more should our public schools preserve safety and privacy in the bathrooms and locker rooms? Because students have to attend school. This proposed policy is morally wrong, biased, and offensive. It needs to be revised to address protecting the safety and privacy of all students. Thank you.
Thank you. Ava Tartarsuch, you're up, and Sherry Payton, you're on deck, please.
Good evening. I'm a very bad speaker. Forgive. I just want to say share a couple of concerns as a parent. First of all, forcing someone to undress in front of someone in whose presence that someone is not comfortable is a violation, and we are talking about respect. So if my daughter doesn't want to undress in front of someone who is transgender, and she used to know him as a boy, and now she declares to be a girl, but there are still parts of him who looks like a boy, I think forcing her by a law to be to undressing next to that person has nothing to do with respect for her. I think locker room situation should be resolved different way, actually considering simple feeling and self-respect of those people who do not accept this kind of situation. Again, forcing someone to undress in front of someone has nothing to do with respect. And vice versa, changing next or in front of the person has nothing to do with respect. We are not talking about playing together. We are not talking about studying together. We are not talking about eating together. We are talking about changing and undressing in front of each other. So it's kind of different of a situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry Payton, you're up. Elisa Kober, you're on deck, please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Shireen Payton, and I'm a resident of District 211. I just want to emphasize that inclusive policies are good for all students. I encourage you all to look at the research, real research from peer-reviewed journals. I also implore you to talk to the experts who are transgender students themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Elisa Kober, you're up. Bethany Morrison, on deck, please.
Good evening. Whenever unrestricted locker room access for transgender students is discussed, it generates passion and often hostile comments on both sides. This issue is actually not that complicated, but requires we acknowledge 4 things. 1, transgender people exist. Some people may not like it, and they may believe or wish that it was not true, but it is. Focusing on the size, number 2, is focusing on the size of a person's body parts as a measure of one's worth or place in this world is unkind and irrelevant. 3, modesty should be an option for all students, but required for none. 4, being uncomfortable and being discriminated against are different things. We don't have a right to never be uncomfortable, but we do have a legal right to not be discriminated against based on sexuality or gender identity in Illinois. People in opposition to having transgender people exist in bathrooms and locker rooms often speak about it by putting students into boxes of victim and perpetrator. A trans woman in the women's bathroom is not a perpetrator. Other women in the same locker room are not victims in a trans woman's presence. The double standard of a trans man being a potential victim at the hands of other men in the same locker room assumes other men are perpetrators. Everyone needs to stop and acknowledge that the same locker room assumes, everyone needs to stop and acknowledge that any true perpetrator of violence or harassment will be dealt with as an entirely separate issue. Trans and non-trans people in the same space does not equal violence and harassment. To assume such is unfair to all sides. I support District 211 allowing transgender students full access to the facilities that align with who they are.
You have 1 more minute.
Let's be real. The administration is not going to allow students to have the right to decide on a whim every day as to which facilities they'll use. Frivolous claims of, today I'm going to be in the boys' room, or today I'll be in the girls' room, they're not going to be honored. This is a gross misunderstanding of transgender individuals and how these policies are implemented. You know, modesty curtains available to all as an option is fantastic, but they should not be required for anyone. I think that if adults stop fixating on how damaging brief exposures to different types of bodies might be in mundane, non-sexual situations, they will realize that this is a non-issue. And for those that it is an issue for, they can use the modesty curtains, no problem. For folks who object to trans inclusion, the scary perception that you seem to have of what it looks like to have transgender folks integrated into everyday life seems to be out of step with what it's actually like. Just students getting ready for gym class or using the restroom, playing no any mind.
Bethany Morrison, you're up. Mark Eikaker, you're on deck, please.
Hello, thank you for hearing my comments. I'm here to express my view that District 211 should not adopt the proposed policy to list gender identity alongside sex as a basis for equal access. My concern is the continued legal protection of women and girls as a class. In this era of the important reckoning of Me Too, it is not consistent to teach young girls that their boundaries of privacy are unimportant. People across the aisle, right, left, and moderate, have valid concerns about basing civil protection policies on an undefined view of gender identity or self-ID rather than sex. Other people who are more articulate than I am have also made public statements about this. Kara Dansky is a lawyer with Women's Liberation Front, which she describes as a far-left feminist organization. I'm going to quote from Ms. Dansky from a recent presentation she made in a public forum. Quote, "If sex is construed to mean gender identity, what that means is that nearly all sex-segregated spaces, colleges, sports, dormitories, and women's rights in general will utterly disappear. It means effectively that women and girls will no longer exist as a coherent category worthy of civil rights protections, and that is an absolute disaster for all of us." Continuing with Ms. Dansky's words as she spoke about congressional gender legislation, quote, "We think equality is a very good thing. Who would be against equality? Everybody likes equality. This very innocuous sounding bill would include gender identity as a legal protected category for civil rights purposes in places of public accommodation. This would utterly obliterate female-only spaces throughout society. It is not possible to both enshrine gender identity in civil rights law and protect women
have
and
one more
girls
minute.
as a distinct legal category at the same time. It's just not possible." Finally, continuing with Ms. Dansky's quote, "Finally, this is about the importance of language. No one really knows what these words mean. I have never gotten a definition of gender identity that is not either completely circular. The Equality Act essentially defines gender identity as the gender you identify with. That's completely and utterly circular, and it tells us nothing about what it means. Or other definitions of gender identity rely on regressive, sex-based stereotypes that have no place in our society from a feminist perspective." Quoting from another feminist, Rebecca Riley Cooper, "If you think that you are a woman and you want to be viewed that way by others, then you have an interest in the continued meaningful existence of that category." Thank you for
Your
hearing my
time has
thoughts.
expired.
Thank you. Mark Eichaker, you're up. Bethany Jones, you're on deck, please.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm a resident of Palatine. I'm a graduate of Palatine High School. And over the years, I've noticed that the high school has deteriorated. We have gang problems, we have drug problems, and this idea of letting boys and girls go in the same washrooms is just it's disgusting. And the fact of the matter is that okay, we're going to let the boys and girls, well then let's take over the teachers' bathrooms, let's take over the teachers' conference rooms, let's pull this all the way through. And the thing is, now we should allow girls to play on the men's football team and the men's basketball team, and you make accommodations for these women to sit there and go and play in the men's sports. In Connecticut, transgender males are sitting there stripping women of the ability to or have scholarships, and they're breaking every record in the book because it's an unfair advantage. And their chromosomes are still male. You can make me into a dolphin, but you know what? Put a hump on my back, but I'm not a dolphin. Thank you.
Thank you. Bethany Jones, you're up. Wei Wang, you're on deck, please. Bethany Jones. Okay, Wei Wang, you are up. Sarah Harrington, you are on deck, please. Wei Wang. I'm sorry, are you Wei Wang?
Yes.
Thank you.
Number 27. Good evening. My name is Wenli Wang. I'm the mom of 2 boys. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to express my opinion. I would like to take the opportunity to share my personal experience. One day, while I was taking a shower in my bathroom at home, I forgot to lock the bathroom door. My 6-year-old son was running around to try to find me, so he opened the bathroom door. I felt so shocked and embarrassed. He is my son. He was only 6 years old at that time. I still feel so embarrassed. It will not be too difficult to imagine how a teenager girl will feel if all of a sudden a biological male opened the locker room door. Transgender students need to be respected. I agree. Meanwhile, non-transgender students also need to be respected. I believe there will be other options and alternatives. For example, set up all gender bathrooms so everyone's privacy and dignity can be protected.
Thank you. Sarah Harrington, you're up. Frank Anarino, on deck, please.
Hello, my name is Sarah Harrington. I'm a senior in high school and I live in District 211. Before I start my speech, I would like to urge the school district that if there's any bullying happening, whether it's for LBGT youth or pro-privacy youth, to stop it. Bullying should never happen. Bullying is wrong. This issue of privacy has been very controversial in District 211 over the past years. But first, I'd like to thank the school board for hosting meetings like these and to continually hearing public opinions about this issue. And I am against the school district's potential locker room policy. On December 7, 2015, a public meeting like this was held to discuss whether a biological boy could use the girls' locker room. At this meeting, a lot of people got the privilege to speak, some individuals who lived in District 211 and some that did not. At this meeting, some of your own students spoke to the school board in front of cameras and hundreds of people, asking, begging, and pleading for their privacy. Yet the school district has completely ignored them. I just want to be clear. I support privacy, but I have no problem with transgender individuals at all. I do not mind being in class with them, talking with them, or being friends with them. I just want privacy from the opposite sex in bathrooms and locker rooms. And that is what pro-privacy people want. For example, I have friends who are the opposite sex as me. I talk and hang out with them. I have no problem with that. When I go to the bathroom, I go to the girls' bathroom and they go to the boys' bathroom. That's common sense. Schools have a duty to protect the privacy, dignity, and well-being of all students. Girls should not be forced to change next to a boy, even if he thinks he's a girl, and vice versa. Boys do not belong in the girls' locker room. It is common sense. All students should be able to have privacy from the opposite sex in a locker room. Privacy is a human right, especially in schools. I urge the school district to seek compassionate solutions, like offering special changing areas for those struggling with their identity that respect the interests of all students. Our community is divided on this issue. Not all students support this locker room policy. I ask the board to remember that all students matter. All students deserve to have privacy. Privacy is a human right.
Thank you. Frank Anarino, you're up. David Ellery, you're on deck, please.
I'm Frank Anarino. I'm from Palatine. I have 4 children. I have 3 girls, 1 boy. They're all going to be going to D211 schools. And I really do think that this new policy shift is something that I oppose. I think what policy you had in place currently was quite sufficient. I think it respected everyone. But now we're basically moving this to having co-ed locker rooms, co-ed bathrooms, co-ed sports. There's a real problem there, because once you open the door to that, how do you administer it? Do people get issued a special trans card to enter the bathroom of their choice? Or do people get to enter the bathroom because that's the way they feel? I mean, honestly, how are you going to administer who goes into which bathrooms? It seems like a very difficult thing for you to be able to do. And that actually would open yourselves up to all kinds of liabilities if anything should ever happen. Let's see, we also have children, the fact that they're uncomfortable changing and using restrooms with other children of the same sex. Imagine how uncomfortable it's going to be for them and how traumatizing and cruel it will be to force them to change or use restrooms of children of the opposite sex. They all know they're of the opposite sex. It's not a surprise. And then, like it was mentioned before, how there may be children uncomfortable using bathrooms and not want to use the bathroom all day. This is the same situation. They'll make people very uncomfortable having to use a bathroom with children of the opposite sex and not use the bathroom all day. So you're creating a new problem instead of solving a problem. Let's see, a policy, along the sports thing, co-ed sports, that's very unfair to the girls. I mean, I don't know how they could honestly, number one, compete for the spot on the team against males. And number two, if they do make the team, then they got to actually compete against them on the opposite side.
You have 1 more minute.
Yeah, on the opposite side of the team. And that's going to cause problems with them too, being able to get scholarships. And for that matter, it's kind of demoralizing to them too to be defeated by a male in a girl's sport.
So I don't know why demoralizing girls is actually a policy that you'd want to enforce. Let's see. We also have an interesting thing when you think about it. It's a law that prisoners, they cannot be supervised in restrooms or in showers by guards of the opposite sex. So I would think it would actually be nice if we would afford that same sort of privilege to our girls and our boys, that they do not have to be with individuals of an opposite sex in their locker rooms or bathrooms. Please reconsider this policy. Do not go down this road, because you're opening yourselves up for a whole lot of problems with regards to complications of how you're going to administer this policy, let alone the fact
Your time
that you're
has
going to be
expired, sir.
traumatizing
Thank
children.
you. David Ellery, you're up, please. James Becker, you're on deck.
I'd like to say, I'm sorry I'm not as prepared as I would like to be. I have a 14-year-old son going to Hoffman Estates, and it just seems like when I hear this issue, it's always, if I disagree with the people, mostly sitting over here, that I'm somehow a bigot. I mean, why is it that you jump from bigotry? I remember the first time when Target did the bathroom thing, and I watched the clip of the news, and I mean, this was a change overnight. It's probably never happened in 5,000 years of human history, recorded human history. And all of a sudden you're a bigot because you have a problem with a man going into a female's washroom. Like if I had a daughter, which I don't, it just seems like, obviously, just because you don't agree with, you believe, like me, there's 2 genders. I don't believe there's 900 genders. I mean, I know that's very scientific. Just kidding. But it's absurd. I mean, I'm hearing of what's happening on these college campuses where people are getting in trouble because they're not addressing a person the right way. It's like so confusing. Kids are in school to study, and yes, you want to care for the other person. You may not agree with how they live, but you still be their friend. But you shouldn't be forced to believe a certain way. But anyway, the whole idea of a poor young girl undressing in front of a guy who is a male anatomically. And as someone else said, there is absolutely no scientific proof that there is,
You have 1 more minute.
a difference there. But as has been stated already, some of you have you have grandkids and kids. And, I don't know if they're going to private schools where maybe this isn't an issue right now. But, I don't know what's going on in each of your lives, but you need to play this out because these things have happened throughout history. Not this particular event, but the whole process of getting to this point has been a lot of manipulation and a lot of shaming of people who disagree. And our founders said, they use the term for the common good very often when they were founding this country, and this is not for the common good of the nation. This is going to bring a lot of destruction. And I know some people don't care. Quite frankly, that's what I see.
Your time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you. James Becker, you're up. Donna Johnson, you're on deck.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you for everyone for coming out and listening. I came here to represent a very small, a special interest group. It's my children, my family. We don't have a lot of money. We're not loud. We're not in your face. We're not really good at filling out court documents. We don't have powerful friends in politics and the media. We don't have deep pockets, and we don't have an agenda. But if you think that we will not fight for what we know is true and good, you're mistaken. I mentioned a few things that we don't do or aren't, but the things we do is pay taxes here, a lot of taxes. And we elect the officers here. And the officers here so far, in my opinion, have not acted on behalf of the taxpayers. It was clear in the meetings 4 years ago that the vast majority of the people were against the policy. As was said earlier by the young lady, the board decided to not listen when some of the students came by and pleaded to be protected and even cried. I watched it. I was here. To me, acting on behalf of the whole student body and the community here means that we may, at our discretion, honor the wishes and make accommodations for people when we feel like it, or when the whole is accommodated for first. If we don't do that, it's tyranny, it's chaos, it breeds contempt. I think this community has great compassion for people with gender dysphoria. Thank you. However, compassion for someone does not endow that person with carte blanche to dictate terms. Your belief that you are the opposite gender does not give you the power to make other people believe it, not as long as this is a free society. The question is, what is reasonable? Unrestricted access based on one person's self-image is not reasonable by any metric. I have a nagging feeling that this board is just going through the motions here. And this is just a sham. And this whole proceeding is just to make everybody feel like they're being heard. Prove that I'm wrong.
Thank you. Donna Johnson. And Julie Kosarin, you're on deck, please.
Good evening. I'd like to start off saying when I was in 6th grade, I was bullied. It was very difficult to be a 6th grader and bullied. The students didn't protect me. The teachers didn't protect me. It was a difficult time. I'd also like to say, fast forward, I have a transgender cousin in my family. He was a male, and now he's transitioned into a female. I love this person, and we've had many discussions about privacy, and my cousin cannot really come to terms with what is the right course for people that have different identity of who they are biologically. But really what I really want to say, because everyone else has said what they needed to say tonight, and it all makes sense from both sides, it really does. But as adults, we really have to come to terms with what is the right thing. And really, is there really a right or is there really a wrong in all of this? How do we find a solution? Do we come up with a second or a third locker room for people? And people that really are compassionate, they can go use that locker room as well, so that nobody really knows who's transgender, who has an identity, you know, I don't want to say issue because I don't want to be offensive, but maybe a third locker room would work. I don't really know. But as adults, we do tend to say, well, let's try it out. So what I'd like to propose right now is that in everyone's mind, in a half hour, which is 9:15, let's all think about this as a locker room. Let's all get undressed. None of you have ever sat there with people that you know and undress in front of them. It's very uncomfortable. Well, maybe some people have, but a lot of students, a lot of young people, they're going through puberty. They have problems just concentrating in school classrooms. In a half hour, they have to go and undress in front of people they don't want to undress in front of That's very difficult. How do they concentrate? I don't really know. But I'd really like to say to all of you, really think about undressing in front of your school board members, or maybe your family, like the woman said. She didn't feel comfortable in front of her son. That's how a lot of people are raised. But we do have to consider
Your time has
people.
expired.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Julie Koserin, please. And Mina Blackburn, you're on deck. Are you Julie Koserin?
I am.
Thank you.
I'm surprised. Thank you so much. I'm very appreciative of this opportunity to speak here tonight. I'm appreciative because I'm a parent. I'm a product of public schools. I'm an informed district neighbor. I'm an Illinois taxpayer. And most importantly, I'm a fellow human being who values fairness and the common good. I'm speaking out tonight in support of the locker room policy that provides equality for all students, including those students who identify as gender nonconforming or transgender. And I hope that this district will join so many other school districts in Illinois who have embraced such policies long ago. Equality has no substitute. And while any student should have the right to privacy if that student chooses, the forced institutional segregation or isolation of any student or group of students will never create tolerance or inclusion or equality. No student should bear the burden, shame, fear, or pain of being separated from peers due to a lack of policy that affirms their full human rights. While the district board has done so much good work to get to this day, current and future students still await the comprehensive equality of a daily school experience in every realm, from the classroom to the lunchroom to the locker room. This board now has the leadership opportunity to help provide an affirming, fair, and equal school environment for all students to flourish. The education of our children, our future generation of leaders, depends on our many decisions and acts. And I hope that empathy, understanding, and respect for all students will guide your upcoming decision and action for equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mina Blackburn, you're up. August Hupp, you are on deck, please.
Good evening. I am a 20-year resident of the district and taxpayer. I have 2 teens in the district. I am asking the board to consider the majority of the student body in this decision. I want to make an example by actually sharing personal information about one of my children who is on a 504 plan. If no one's familiar with that, it is accommodations that are by law for children with special needs. In this case, it is depression, anxiety, sort of special needs that my child has. And if my child has a panic attack or has an anxiety attack in class, they have the accommodations to leave. They have all kinds of accommodations at the school that my child is at. I've never once requested, or my child requested, that the entire majority of the class leave because they are having a panic attack or because they're having depression. My child suffers too. All children suffer. All children get bullied and things like that. So I'm also a Muslim American activist. I'm very sensitive to issues about bigotry and about diversity and inclusion. And I don't think anyone should ever be bullied for whatever you identify as, whatever your religious beliefs are, whatever your gender is. But I don't think we should conflate this issue and try to make me out to be a bigot, because I don't want my son and my daughter to be in a changing room with the opposite sex. I think forcing this on my family is a violation, and also a violation of my religious beliefs. I do hope that the people, the minority that it does affect, that there is an option that is settled on.
You have
I
one more
keep-
minute.
I keep thinking that a third option would be wonderful. I love what one of the other speakers said, where anyone could enter. If there are, everyone should be compassionate, and if there are compassionate people that don't have religious violations like mine does or other things, they can all go in there. Is my time up? Pardon? Okay, I think I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. August Hupp. Cynthia Zimmerman, you're on deck, please.
Hey, y'all. My name is August Hupp. I use they, them pronouns. I am an intersex and non-binary person, and I'm also a member of a nonprofit that does a lot of things and supports children of all identities, but I specifically work for our Pride program supporting LGBT youth. Last time, 4 years ago, I testified and spoke about my experiences as a trans person, as an intersex person, and as someone who has survived several accounts of assault by cis people directly related to my trans identity. So today, instead of talking about trans trauma, which is what cis people talk about a lot, I want to talk about trans joy and moments of trans joy that I get to be witness to and be a part of all the time. So earlier tonight, I was leading a LGBT high school support group, and we were eating pizza and working on an art project and just generally building social connections. That was really cute. We were doing some painting of Halloween crafts. People are very into Halloween. Let me see. I have seen a lot of people cry tears of joy over getting to take a next step in their transition, either socially, medically, or legally. I myself have a lovely tattoo celebrating 4 years of getting my name legally confirmed that I get compliments on all the time, and it just makes me feel good. Let me see what else. I've been a counselor for the past 4 years at Action Camp, which is a super rad week-long sleepaway camp for Illinois youth all across the state who hold LGBT identities to come gather in the woods and celebrate each other and uplift each other, and also hone their leadership skills to then go back to their
You
own
have one more
communities
minute.
and support each other. There's a lot of really magical moments that happen there. People try pronouns there that they haven't tried before because they, know that it's a supportive community. And also, I've seen people have the effects of not having to navigate bathrooms and locker rooms, having less UTIs, which you get a lot when you can't go pee places. And so just generally seeing a lot of moments of joy. So I just want to invite y'all to continue to support trans joy by investing in this new policy change that will allow for equal access for all students to access the locker rooms. So thanks for hearing me out, y'all.
Thank you. Cynthia Zimmerman. Cynthia Zimmerman. All right, we'll move on to the next person, Dan Harrington.
Hi, my name is Dan Harrington. I live in Hoffman Estates and within District 211's boundaries. Biological boys don't belong in girls' locker rooms and restrooms. This is common sense. Schools should provide accommodations for students who are uncomfortable changing with his or her own biological sex, like separate changing areas. Any other solution is illogical. Your choice is and has been simple. Either you defend the rights of all students or you don't. People have the right to bodily privacy. Many people have spoken to you logically and given sound reason why boys should not be in girls' changing areas. However, what I first heard at the first school board meeting I attended was very compelling. I first heard that a school district was allowing this 4 years ago. I did not think this was possible. When I discovered that this was my local high school district, I went to my very first board meeting on December 7th, 2015. What I heard shocked me. 4 young women, minors, said they have no problem, while they have no problem with transgenders or homosexuals, they simply do not want to be forced to undress in front of a boy. One young lady said she was being bullied and her rights were violated. These were her words, paraphrased, not mine. The very fact that allowing a boy into a girl's locker room is being discussed is appalling, yet the school board allowed it. I thought I was living in a dictatorship. I know the school district has said there are accommodations for students uncomfortable changing or using the restroom with someone of the opposite sex. Yet as the lawsuit pointed out, these accommodations were really accommodations. I don't have time to go on the accusations, but here's one. This is from a senior at Fremd High School, referring to student A. Even though the school went out of their way to accommodate this person with privacy areas in the locker room, they chose to change in the open area. This person chose a locker directly to mine and made me extremely uncomfortable. This person was obnoxious and the invasion of my privacy so much that I went to change in the bathroom stalls multiple times. I'm appalled that I was forced to give up my right of privacy for the wishes of someone else. This is a senior that was affected by this. This is sexual harassment. If this ain't sexual harassment, I don't know what is. This is sexual harassment.
You have one more minute.
Bodily privacy is a right. Young men and women have rights. Not every school is okay with changing in front of someone of the opposite sex. As one of our founding documents of this country said, all men are created equal. They are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. Neither you nor I have the authority to violate somebody's rights. The very fact that we're discussing this, let alone this being done, is a travesty.
Thank you. That concludes the citizen appearances portion of the meeting. Our next item of business is the public hearing on the 2019-2020 budget. We have a suggested motion that the public hearing on the 2019-2020 budget of Township High School District 211 is now open. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Just like we agreed to. Okay, I thought that was no, 25 speakers. Okay. One person didn't speak. Another person didn't speak. Left? Oh. Oh, there's sheets. 100. I wouldn't know that person if I saw her.
In the second row, they're kind of behind the three ladies that were making all the noise and laughing and being a little rude.
I didn't notice the people. I heard people, but I didn't notice people.
And Gillespie was behind.
I like kind of like rolling around like that.
Yeah, I'm gonna whack the gavel.
Over at the door there.
Sure. If you could, we need to continue with our meeting, so if you would like to discuss things, if you could move into the hallway or outside, please. Thank you. Is there anyone here tonight that would like to address the board during this public hearing? on the budget for 2019-2020? If so, please come forward to the podium. I see no one. So we'll have our second suggested motion that the public hearing on the 2019-2020 budget of Township High School District 211 is now closed. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that will bring us to our consent agenda. We have a suggested motion that the consent agenda be approved as presented. Can someone please move that?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Cavill.
Aye.
Mr. Kramer.
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski.
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre.
Aye. That will bring us to special reports. First, we have our Freedom of Information Act requests. If there are no questions here, item B, report on new professional staff. Any questions here? That will bring us to item C, the report on sixth day enrollment. Any questions here? And next will be our class size committee report. Any questions here? That will bring us to our salary compensation report. Any questions?
I do have a question actually about this. When I was looking, I was just wondering if someone could clarify for me if we have a limit on vacation day accrual. Is there a limit, or is that an unlimited amount for the number of vacation days that people can accrue?
So they expire each year,
Okay,
and so they don't accrue.
All right, that will bring us to our tax increment financing report. Any questions here? And then the last report is the superintendent search update. Any questions? That will bring us to unfinished business. First, we have resolution authorizing the adoption of the 2019-2020 budget. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education adopt the resolution as presented to establish the fiscal year of the school district to begin July 1, 2019 and end July 30, 2020, and that the budget as presented for the fiscal year 2019-2020 be adopted. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion here.
Yeah, I have some comments I'd like to just address to my fellow colleagues here on the board. Year after year, this administration proposes a budget that includes property taxpayer revenue constantly increasing within the property tax extension limit law, the PTEL. The PTEL limit is intended to slow the growth of revenues to taxing districts when property values and assessments are increasing faster than the rate of inflation. As a whole, property owners have some protection from tax bills that increase only because the market value of their property is rising rapidly. Unfortunately, our property values are not increasing faster than the rate of inflation, thereby corrupting a law intended to limit high property taxes into an unjustifiable rationale for high property taxes. This became very clear to everyone during the recent property tax assessment by the county. As stewards elected by our community, it is our responsibility to limit spending and property taxes when necessary. In order to fulfill these responsibilities, this board has to define parameters for the administration. This administration will not recommend less property tax than the PTEL will allow. The burden is ours alone. We willingly knocked on doors asking for votes and the associated responsibility. The budget neither limits revenue projections to an annual amount that is reasonably below the PTEL, nor an amount of budget growth that aligns with the increases of local property values. This should be the cap. We, as responsible representatives of our community, should self-impose. We must be willing to look beyond the recommendations provided and, without a doubt, demonstrate to our community that this board will be frugal when spending and responsible with our taxing power. Although we approved the revenue for this budget in December of 2018, there has been little adjustment from the prior budget to recognize the deficiencies that resulted in a $9.15 million revenue surplus. Additionally, this budget projects to end the fiscal year with over 14% growth in fund balances or reserves. This results in the fund balance increasing from 43.8% to 50.2%. This is the opposite direction of the strategic plan goal of moving towards the board policy of 33%. If this board decides to hold off on the IRMF payments, that fund balance can reach as high as 52%. If the administration's presented budget has similar results as last year with an unanticipated surplus of nearly $9 million, the board could be looking at a fund balance of 55%. Yet the administration will recommend a property tax levy as entitled by PTEL. The district has paid off all bonds, consistently improved facilities, generously compensated staff, reduced liabilities, and expanded student opportunities. The only thing the district has failed to accomplish is a meaningful reduction in property taxes. We need to start somewhere. With all of the staff expertise and financial strength of this district, that should be a reasonable task. Simply because it is recommended does not justify it as the best course for our community.
Anyone else?
Sure. Anybody else? I don't want to. As I talked about last time, with the $5 million IMRF payment in the budget, I cannot support this budget.
So here's the issue for me. When we're talking about, we look at the same sets of numbers, and the numbers are such that it's easy to come to obviously different conclusions. But in looking at this budget and going over it and going over it again, looking for readily accessible fat to trim, the margins, as I can see in the efficiencies in the budget, are highly efficient. So I'm absolutely willing to have a conversation. I said this, well before I even ran. I think we do need to have a conversation about the fund balance policy. I think that's overdue. That is something that we need to talk about. But when we're talking about broadly property tax relief, the thing that's always missing for me from the conversation is what exactly do you not want to pay for anymore in the cuts? And I feel like that would enable an actually honest conversation. Because when we say to people, we can find all of these efficiencies and we can drastically cut our expenditures to the point where people can see not just a minor but a very sizable reduction in their property taxes. The part that's always missing is what do you not want to pay for? And in looking at the budget, the vast majority of our funds really go to instruction and to teachers. And so even if we're saying, well, we'll just cease capital improvements completely, which isn't reasonable, it's not reasonable. But even if we said that, that still wouldn't cut it to the point where we would see that a very sizable reduction in our property taxes, which I, as much as anybody else, would love. And so really, where that money would have to come from is instruction. So when we're talking about instruction, that means fewer teachers or less qualified teachers. That means more students in each class. That means cutting many of the extracurricular programs that is offered at the school. I went to a very small school where most of these programs I hadn't even heard of before. But at the same time, if we have a conversation about like, okay, as a community, we've decided that our schools are too expensive and we're just, understandably very angry. I'm very angry myself about the way we fund education in the state and the way we have property taxes situated and the politics that goes into that. I'm just as angry as everybody else. If we can say, as a response, we're so angry, we're going to gut our local schools and we are just not going to pay for this many teachers anymore. Our class sizes are going to go up. Our metrics that we brag about continually every spring, especially as we have student after student after student come in here with academic awards and huge graduation rates and very low staff turnover and an incredibly high ratio of teachers that have master's and higher qualifications compared to state averages and nearby school districts. If we are saying, no, property taxes are too high, it's too expensive, we simply can't do this anymore, we can have a conversation about that. But then we also need to acknowledge the fact that those metrics are going to change and saying that we are going to make the kind of cuts that would reduce property taxes in half, because when we even say a flat tax and that's a cut at the end of the day, then we have to be honest about what we're not willing to pay for and whether the community all agrees with that in totality. And so, in general, I'm absolutely willing. I think we need more discussion about the extra payment. I think we do. That's why we need another budget hearing, and a meeting about that specifically. I think we do need to have a robust conversation about the reserves, absolutely. But I also think if we are going to deal with this tension around property taxes in our school, I think it's best to do that in good faith, and that's acknowledging that when we significantly decrease our revenues in a very efficiently run district, that does mean cuts, and then we have to talk about what are we not going to pay for anymore. And if we're not even willing to be honest about what that means, then it's hard to take this conversation anywhere serious for me.
With all due respect, Ms. Cavill, we paid for everything in our last year's budget, and we still had $9 million left over. I don't see it as being a very efficient budget when you do pay for every single item on that list without having to make any cuts, and at the end of the budget, you're sitting there with $9 million. I understand your point, but I don't think it's applicable here.
I don't think so. I don't think what you're saying is accurate, though. You want to pay about this $9 million because it's a big, impressive number, but so is our overall budget. It is a big, impressive number. So, yes, $9 million is a lot of money. So is $250 million when we're talking about a budget, which is why you deliberately, I think, don't use a percentage when you're talking about it, because we are an efficiently run district. So that's fine.
Percentage-wise, that would be about 4%, which would be about 1.5% larger than what our PTEL increase would be.
So this is what I'm saying. Now we're having a good faith conversation, because I feel like within there, sure, I'm all for efficiency, as razor-thin margins as we can comfortably afford while still making sure to pay our bills on time. But what it's hard for me to take is what sounds to my ears like big promises about the amount that we can save our understandably angry taxpayers without acknowledging that it's not like we have a bucket of 25% of fat to cut without making actual cuts in instructional costs, which is really what we're paying for. So it's not that I'm saying that we can't have a discussion on money. We absolutely can. This is a big part of our job. I really do think that we need to talk about this fund balance policy. But I just want to make sure that all of us are putting all of our cards on the table. That's all I'm saying.
I appreciate the comments of my colleagues. A few things. One is I want to make sure that we're separating our conversation around the levy versus the budget, whereas the budget is how we're going to be, or how we spend the money to which we're levying ourselves and our community. I think that one thing that I wanted to bring up, which I also brought up last month, is that as the year progresses, we do, as a board, have an opportunity, and I think a responsibility, to review the budget. And if we find ourselves in a favorable place, then we have the ability to adjust the budget to be able to perhaps put our taxpayers in a better situation than when the budget is initially approved. So throughout the year, we have the ability, and people can bring up proposals at different board meetings and different times to ask for a review and perhaps a renewal of different parts of the budget, but I don't know if that's ever been done. I've only been on the board since 2017, and I know that that hasn't been done since I've been here. So I would like to welcome and encourage that. I would be certainly open to having those conversations throughout the year as we progress and see how our spending goes. I'd also like to revisit the spending that we're putting in towards the IMRF payments and the additional payments there. I do think there's an opportunity for further discussion and better educating ourselves around the benefits, pros and cons of doing that, and the impact that that has as well. The fund budget balance policy, I'd be open to having conversation around that. Whether it would be changed or not, I don't know yet, but certainly it's worth having discussion on. Keeping in mind, as we've heard at previous board meetings throughout the year,
that sometimes what people throw out as a fund balance at a certain point of time is not what the policy is about. The policy is how we end the fiscal year. So I'd like to, maybe we can look at how we can more accurately target that amount and be more responsible with how we're spending that money, not so that some other people may have said, either in the community or even on this board, that we're spending in order to get to a certain figure at the end of the year. I would like to think that we're all very responsible, ethical and professional members here, as well as members of the community and taxpayers, that we are always looking at how best to spend the figures that we have and not just spend it because it's there. I think that would be an irresponsible act on ourselves. I would like to seek additional community input. Unfortunately, when we have comments and periods of discussion around our budget, I'm not fully satisfied with the amount of input that we get, especially at our board meetings from the community around the budget and how we're spending money. We hear it when we're out in the community, but we don't hear it as much from multiple members of the community at our meetings. And so I'd like to encourage more members of the community to come forth and give their input. We do have great educators. We have great facilities, and we have outstanding programs for our students. It is shown to us every day, not just when we have recognition programs and recognition at our board meetings, but it happens every single day in our community, among our students and our staff and our administrators. And I would be hesitant to take action that would negatively impact that, but also look at how we can perhaps be more fiscally responsible while maintaining our quality.
Anyone else?
I do have a comment just to kind of bring maybe a little bit historical perspective. And if I understood you correctly, you were asking if in the past we've done some things to take a look at our expenditures and cut back. I can't give you the exact number of years back, but it was prior to the referendum. The superintendent that we had at the time took a look. The board asked him to take a look at what expenditures can be reviewed and what we can cut. I believe at that time we were able to kind of decrease our expenditures by about $5 million. So it was a substantial amount. And again, maybe that's something that we could do. I do think that it's really important we look at the long range, because we were not doing working cash bonds. We decided that we didn't need to do that, and our budget reflects that. But in order to maintain our buildings, to do what we need for our students, to provide the appropriate surroundings that are safe and secure for staff and for students, we have certain capital outlays that we have to do. So that money that we have in the budget does have to last us for a number of years. And I think that's an important consideration that we have to have. So maybe talking about our fund balance, the percentage, that probably should be a conversation. Does it need to be lower? Maybe it even needs to be a little bit higher. I don't know. We don't know what the state is going to do. And maybe within the next couple of years, we're going to find out, and it may not be to our liking. So I think that those are important considerations. So everything that's been said here this evening is important, and we need to have this discussion. So I think this is a great board for bringing up issues and concerns and bringing things forward. And I think that's important, and we need to be having those conversations. So as we start going through our budget process, I'm certain we're going to continue with those discussions, which is the way it should be.
Several comments I'd like to offer. The proposed budget for 2020 is a direct outgrowth and manifestation of the strategic plan adopted by the board in 2016. That was after months of meetings with community members. The budget plan is possible only through years of good stewardship and sound financial decisions. This budget provides for quality educational and extracurricular programs, sound asset management, safe and effective improvements to our facilities, and enables us to accomplish all of these priorities free from debt. The strategic plan details the board's priorities over a 5-year period. We developed the 2020 budget specifically to align with these strategic goals, including all of the following. The budget is balanced, sustainable, and aligned with district goals. The budget continues to utilize existing reserves, including transfers from reserves to pay for capital projects and mandated life safety projects. In the past 5 years, we have reduced the district's reserves by $60 million. By achieving the board's priority of operating free from debt last December, this budget eliminates debt payments that typically ranged from $3 million to $5 million per year. This budget is part of an overall strategy to pay for all capital projects, much like any home or business. We save money during the course of 1 year to pay for projects in the next. The budget includes efficiencies of $700,000 through changes to our self-funded health care plan, through competitive bidding, and as a result of analysis of our telecommunications expenses. Since 2016, we have now implemented more than $5 million in efficiencies. We have identified potential energy efficiencies, and this budget reflects the addition of solar panels to the Higgins Education Center, installation of highly efficient mechanical equipment, the continued purchase of propane buses to replace diesel buses, and the changeover to efficient LED lighting. Following an RFP for banking services, the district consolidated all banking to a central bank, saving substantial fees and administration time while also increasing interest returns. This budget reflects implementation of this goal for the second full year. The strategic plan called for us to reduce the district's liability for health insurance plans afforded to our retirees. Our changes reduce the district's future liability by over $28 million and resulted in yearly savings for the district. The 2020 budget includes an additional payment to IMRF of $5 million as part of the board's strategic priority to reduce the district's pension liability. This prepayment investment also serves as a potential source of a significantly higher rate of return on our assets. The strategic plan called for a 10-year capital plan and proposed the 2020 budget includes funds to fulfill the current year's projects. The budget reflects the anticipated revenues included in the fund balance that was referenced of more than $17.7 million from the sale of a 60-acre vacant property that we have held and we will only sell one time. That followed extensive community outreach. This budget will sustain the district's quality through efficient and responsible stewardship.
Any other remarks? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mr. Creamer?
No.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Nay.
Ms. Cavill?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre?
Aye. That motion carries. That will bring us to new business. We have a proposed policy, equal educational opportunities. Any discussion here?
I do have a comment, and I guess I'm disappointed that our audience did not remain, because if we listen to them, they should be able to listen to us also. So I'm a little disappointed. But I do have a comment to share and my thoughts on this. I wanted to thank everyone, who expressed an opinion. It's valued and it's considered. The text messages, any phone calls, conversations, things of that, I think that that's important. We have always been transparent, and we will continue to be as far as I'm concerned. 4 years ago, we struggled with this issue, and after several hours of closed session, the board, which I was a part of, provided a solution that we felt was most workable for all. Did it satisfy everyone? No. But it was the best solution at the time. Several changing stalls, much like a store dressing room type, were placed in each of the locker rooms that anyone can use, and I think that that's the most important thing. This will not change. The changing rooms will remain. With this change in policy, the transgender student will have a choice as to use the changing station. Anyone is able to use that, and I believe a number of students have, whether they're just want the privacy, they're able to use that. We reviewed the policies from surrounding districts. We found that they allowed for the unrestricted. Unfortunately, 4 years ago, most of the districts really didn't follow our lead, but they went along with the policies that were presented to them. And they have the unlimited, unrestricted access. And I don't know if the other school districts were as transparent as we have been to get input from the community. I can't speak to that, but I think we were pretty publicized at the time. The well-being, safety, and strong education of all of our students have been my priority, and I believe that the administration has established a detailed, defined procedure if a student expresses that they are transgender, and I think that was brought up at the beginning, and that's an important consideration to have. The administration speaks with the parents, counselors are involved, and many steps are taken before allowing access to the locker room or to the bathroom. I believe this board has tried to be transparent with all issues that involve policies, and if I have anything to say in regards to that, I would like that to continue with that transparency. It's not a matter of who wins or loses. It's a matter of how best to support all of our students. Whatever we do is going to make somebody unhappy. We've been fighting this for the last 4 years. And in my opinion, I think it's time for some outside groups to step away from the students and allow them to be students who want to learn, who want to make friends, who want to enjoy life, and want to contribute to the community. We have great kids in this community, and they've learned a lot. They treat people with respect. Yeah, they get into some mischief at times, but our kids are really great in this community, and I want to make sure that we support them as best we can. Thank you.
May I just quickly, I think we're moving too fast on trying to implement this policy. Children are involved, and I think that we must take caution and slow the process down to make sure that we are doing due diligence. There are many open questions in my mind. How is this policy actually going to be implemented? I don't know. Okay, what are the practices that are going to be employed in the school if this policy is passed? I don't feel that without those specific practices and policies that I can make an informed decision on this. And I would ask that we slow it down. I don't think another 30 days is long enough. If it goes longer than that, so be it. This is obviously an issue that is of utmost importance, maybe even more than the tax levy to the citizens of our district. And I think we owe it to them to be cautious, to be careful, and to be diligent.
I would have to agree with Mr. Kramer there. I think the community doesn't understand how this policy is going to be implemented and what kind of safety procedures we are going to look for, because I think that was a gist of a lot of the emails that we got, a lot of the texts, was how are we going to ensure that everybody was going to be safe. And at this point, there hasn't been any real discussion or showing of what we are going to do to implement it and protect all students. So, I concur with you, Mr. Kramer.
These are my thoughts, and I write them down so I don't derail myself. First, thank you to everyone that has taken the time to email, phone, and personally address the Board of Education. The Board of Education has the entrusted responsibility to the community of educating our children. We are placed here by parents, grandparents, and non-parents, all with the unified goal of improving children who enter as eager freshmen and graduate beyond the D211 rigor. We represent many voices with our votes. We are elected to sit here and work through complex issues associated with the D211 education. Some within our community suggest voluntary unisex spaces are a solution. It would be remiss not to provide the experience of educators that have personally conveyed the challenges of policing romantic rendezvous. How can parents expect this district to keep children focused if we would adopt a policy that undermines our own ability to enforce and separate students by biological sex? Some within our community suggest that students decide this issue. As adults, we cannot abdicate responsibilities and elevate teenagers to adults. The prefrontal cortex will continue developing into the early 20s. Risk-taking is a norm for most high school teenagers. Not all risk-taking is negative, but when it encroaches on another's privacy or boundaries, it must be discouraged. We must retain our ability to enforce boundaries. School environments are challenging regardless of the individual. Students face a different teacher every 50 minutes. Adults rarely have 5 different taskmasters. Some teachers do not consider demands other instructors or coaches may place on children. Students navigate social groups and cues. They learn by trial and error. Society is in constant flux regarding acceptable standards, conditioning people to be more guarded. Consequences of offense may be severe and society slow to forgive. For example, flattery has become a lost art for fear of misconstrued intentions. Students learn to deal with diversity, colliding cultures, to the point where students may have their first exposure to peers dealing with poverty, racial differences, religious values, sexual awakening, academic potential, physical changes, mental anxiety or depression, abuse, family instability, homelessness, and even gender fluidity. Our children must navigate social complexities that may contrast or reinforce their own limited experiences. Our communities are not homogeneous, and we do embrace this diversity as a strength of our community. This policy presented tonight is silent on definition of gender identity. This board should simply be able to adopt a policy that states equal education and extracurricular opportunities shall be available for all students, period. I strongly recommend that. District 211 has supported non-conforming students and their families for a very long time. If we cannot proceed with a simple policy, it would be reckless to adopt this vague policy lacking clearly defined support any student should expect. Prior to this policy, the Board of Education supported the superintendent to responsibly engage a student's family, impacted staff, and associated medical professionals. This process deliberately assisted our children determining a proper plan for integration within the student body. This responsibility and process is not exclusive to transgender students. This proposed policy presented tonight by administration is disappointing and reckless. It relinquishes responsibility to enforce boundaries and removes careful and supportive guidance students need most. We must have clear rules for both the educated and ignorant. There must be a policy that prevents a misappropriation of transgender identity. Ignorant individuals that might claim self-identification of gender without help and support of available professionals risk their safety and the safety of others. I cannot support this policy without added language or additional policy which returns enforcement, guidance, and process to the superintendent or this board. To allow unfeathered self-identification of gender without the support and resources of this district falls short of the expectations of our entire community. Thank you.
Anyone else?
We all care very deeply about the safety and well-being of every student in our schools. This includes young people who have survived the unconscionable crime of sexual violence. Sexual violence is a big problem in the United States. 1 in 6 women, 1 in 33 men have survived sexual violence. The rates are even higher for genderqueer, trans, and gender nonconforming young people. Even one survivor is one too many. As a person who works in sexual violence prevention education and a survivor myself, I would never support a policy that put anyone at increased risk for sexual violence or sexual harassment. We all want to keep kids safe, but discriminating against transgender people does not decrease anyone's risk of sexual assault. It does not make anyone safer. What makes people safer from sexual violence is 5 things: the promotion of nonviolent social norms, comprehensive sex education programs that include information about healthy and unhealthy relationship dynamics, strengthening economic supports for women and girls, providing victim-centered services to those who do experience sexual violence, and creating protective environments, which includes the consistent enforcement of anti-bullying and anti-harassment policies. It's that last protective factor that I want to focus on. Allowing unrestricted locker room access to trans students does not endanger young people who survive sexual violence. To suggest it does is to suggest trans students are sexual predators in waiting, which they are not. It suggests this policy allows students to engage in violence, harassment, or bullying, which it does not. And it suggests the men and boys at District 211 are only prevented from assaulting people in the girls' locker room by the sign on the door, which is absurd. To the contrary of some of the arguments presented, all evidence shows the proposed policy makes people safer in 3 important ways. First, trans people are at high risk when they are not allowed access to facilities that match their gender identity. And as a district, we've made a commitment to all students, trans and cisgender, to maintain a safe, respectful, and welcoming environment that fosters learning. Creating and maintaining this environment is one of the most important protective factors in the overall reduction of school-based violence, and this policy supports that goal. Secondly, mandating some students use specific areas of an otherwise communal facility, but not others, is clearly discriminatory, and I don't support discrimination. Lastly, and most importantly, this policy extends privacy protections to any student who needs them for any reason. This benefits all of us. It benefits those like myself who survive sexual violence and wish to change in a more private area. It benefits trans people in various stages of transition who are not comfortable in a communal facility and need more privacy. It benefits any young person who feels the need to use a changing cubicle, no questions asked. Students who wish for increased privacy can access those facilities. Students who don't can use communal facilities in accordance with their gender identity. This actually frees staff to focus on their very important duties rather than policing people's gender expression, since no one submits to an anatomical exam before enrolling in our schools. Though we certainly don't agree on every issue, I do know that every single member of this board shares District 211's commitment to providing a safe, welcoming environment that facilitates learning, which is why our district does not tolerate violence, bullying, or harassment of any kind. I personally will not tolerate the harassment of trans or gender nonconforming young people, just as I will not tolerate the harassment of those who wish to use a private changing area because of their religious principles or their feelings of discomfort in a communal changing area. As adults, I agree, it is our job to give our children the tools they need to successfully navigate the diverse world they live in, to regulate their own behavior, and to teach them the difference between feeling uncomfortable and actually being unsafe. That includes modeling how to respectfully have very difficult, contentious conversations about topics on which we very passionately disagree, and how to advocate for accommodations they need in order to succeed, and to recognize the inherent worth and dignity of every single person, no matter how different they seem to us at first glance.
Any other comments? I have some. I didn't come as prepared as my fellow board members did, but first of all, I'd like to make mention that I have no issue for the suggestion by Mr. Kramer to perhaps postpone our voting from the next board meeting to give us more opportunity, as Mr. Dombrowski had said, to better define some of the implementation policies and practices in support of this policy. I'd like to thank everyone for coming today, for the hundreds of you that are, the few of you who are left here, and those who may see this online later. I think that it's a great opportunity for us to get community input, and if we do postpone this from next month to perhaps the following, to have next month for additional opportunity for community input in a verbal sense, as well as the next month before we vote, and certainly to continue to have other opportunities for the community to give us input, be it written, face-to-face, phone calls, what have you. I do know that, for instance, on some other policies that are already in place in our community, that or our adjoining communities, that there are definitions, for instance, as to what different things are that are associated and impacted by the policy. So I'd like to see some more, I guess, call it guts to the policy than what we are seeing today. I think that, I don't think that this is a taxpayer policy, and I hope I'm not going to be seeing issues on that
comment by me. I think this is a student policy. I think it is a policy that needs to address the students, their safety, their well-being, their non-discriminatory practices, and their successful education, as well as how they're treated, their safety and support. So I think that that's very important, and so I would like to see some of those things laid out better, and I think that adding another 30 days to give additional opportunity for community input, as well as putting some more substance to the policy, would be very worthwhile.
I was going to just ask, tell me what you're looking for to be added to the policy. Is it part of the procedure that you're looking to be added to the policy, or what are you looking for?
I'd like to see more definitions around identifying the individuals that this policy is specifically supporting or addressing. I know that there's a definition on here to appoint a non-discrimination coordinator. I would like more definition around how that person is being selected, their roles and responsibilities, more information about how transgender students will be identified, supported, and upheld in our schools, and also how and when this policy would be implemented. I didn't see anything in here that said it would be effective on a certain date, or how it would be communicated and implemented within the schools. And I'd like to see some more information around that.
So, and I apologize if I'm trying to get a little bit more specific here. So we're looking, or what I'm hearing from you is it's getting away from an equal education opportunity for all students to something just specific for transgender. Is that what you're looking for?
Lines 17 and 18, students shall be treated and supported in a manner consistent with their gender identity, which shall include students having access to restrooms and locker rooms that correspond to their gender identity. So this policy is around gender identity. There is a portion of this policy specific to equal educational opportunities around gender identity. So I'd like more information and more identification as to what that means and how it's going to be implemented. I see a policy saying we're looking to do this, but nothing on how we're going to do it. And I'd like to see the how.
You want to understand what the how is, because not that you want procedures in the policy, right?
Correct. I don't need to see, number one, the student will meet with some, that kind of thing. I think more just to
You just want to understand what that will look like operationally.
Correct.
So I just want to clarify, you are asking for a review of the separate standalone document called procedures that define what would be implemented in this policy.
I'm trying to understand perhaps how we can have a policy without that. And I don't think we can.
None of our policies, I won't say none, most of our policies are built in a fashion that does not include procedures. It is the difference of governance and procedural operationalizing what we do as administrators.
I guess my question is, do we have policies that don't have procedures?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Well, I would like to request that this not be one of those.
You would like to, so that's what I'm trying to clarify. So you do want the procedures incorporated as a matter of policy. That's what you would like to see.
I think that would be beneficial, and I think it would be very transparent to our community for them to be able to see and understand that.
So they don't have to look someplace else.
Or take a wild guess at how it's being done. I think from a transparency perspective, which this board needs to be, that would be very helpful to the community.
Dr. Cates, does anything preclude us from releasing our procedures in this area?
No.
No. So I would be more I think we should share our procedures, which is, I think, the meat of what you're asking. Yeah, absolutely, in the name of transparency. I do not agree that it's a good idea to put that procedure into policy, not just for pedantics, but because especially in this area, the only thing I would really be willing to consider is adding in policy, like the naming of an anti-discrimination coordinator, whatever, equal opportunity, whatever we wish to call it. But the thing is that we have to remember that not all trans people are the same, and so their experiences and their needs aren't the same. And so if we make procedures part of policy, that's not going to be very effective. And we also have to remember that this really isn't, again, as I said, this isn't just about trans people. This is about all students. So if we're then narrowing this and putting procedures that are specific to trans students in a policy that's really to benefit everybody, I think it gets muddy and confused. And I think it kind of takes away from the really important flexibility that the administration needs to effectively do their job and effectively serve students that are coming from wildly different families and have wildly different needs.
I disagree. I think it has to be very, very specific, whether we're talking about the transgender community or the non-transgender, to encompass everybody, because the definitions have to be very, very clear.
I'm not disagreeing with you about specifics. What I'm saying is we should release both. We should do policy. I don't see a need, and I see a very clearly potential negative effect on putting procedure into policy in this area. But I do feel like our
Let's try to let one person speak, and when that person is finished, we'll hear everyone who wants to speak. Ms. Cavill.
I absolutely think our procedures should be specific. I think they should be. We should be transparent about what those are. I think they should be as clear as it's possible to make them. I just don't think that we, in this instance, should combine the two. I just don't.
Mr. Kramer.
I think, thank you, I cannot vote on a policy in good conscience without understanding how it's going to be implemented. The devil is in the details. And without some specifics from the administration, I can't proceed. I'm at a loss. It has to be there.
And I think part of our duty to the community is to share that with them. And I think that part of what they want is to know that information. And part of what I want is to know their thoughts on that as well. Not just on the policy, but on the procedures and how things are going to be done. And I think that might answer some questions and concerns that we even heard addressed this evening.
I believe that we do need to consider this, and I think that the procedure is important, so we need to see what that procedure is. My only concern is that sometimes if you have the procedure right here in your policies, it doesn't allow for some of the flexibility that may be needed by the administration. And again, we have to remember our role as the governance, and the administration has certain duties that they have to do and be able to do. Maybe we can take this policy back, kind of refine it a little bit, put in some of the suggestions that have been presented. I know Mr. Dombrowski had some points that he thought, yourself, Ms. Cavill. So, putting some of those things in there for clarity and transparency is a good thing, but still being able to allow the administration the flexibility to deal with our students. As we see, our students are very diverse. I don't know what's coming down the road. I don't know what has to be changed maybe in the procedure, but I'm thinking it's easier to change our procedure a little bit or tweaking it as opposed to coming back and changing policy.
Well, then I'd go back to our debate that this board had in 2016 where we just maintained absent a policy and allowed the superintendent to proceed with process absent the policy, which was what we settled on when we first talked about establishing a policy. And even at that time, I would say, let's just write a policy that says it's at the superintendent's discretion within the purview of his administration. And that was kind of
what we decided to do until all the lawsuits settled out. Now, I do understand that we are in litigation with the ACLU, but you know what? I think our community is going to support our decision and what we've been doing to this point. And if we have to litigate with the ACLU, then so be it. I'd be perfectly fine not adopting this policy and continuing the practices as is with our trust and faith in Dr. Cates and the administration, and then to continue to defend our process as we've been proceeding. Any other comments here?
No, I definitely think the community needs to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it. And I think, in essence, all the emails that I got, there's a lot of misunderstanding out there. And if we don't clarify this, we're going to still have a lot of people, emailing us, saying that this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And until we clarify to them, kind of not necessarily satisfy them, but at least let them know where we're going. It's going to be real tough, and we're always going to keep getting nasty emails.
I support absolutely giving the procedures out. I would even support more time to allow more community input. I think those things are perfectly fair. I just want to disabuse anybody of the notion that those extra measures will somehow make this more palatable. And it won't. I mean, very, very clearly. There is no, I very much dearly wish, and I'm sure everybody does, wish that there was some unicorn solution out there that would make every single person happy. That it does not exist. So even if we give our procedures, which we absolutely should, even if we're as transparent about this issue as we absolutely should be, and if we give more time, which we have to spend, then we should do that. But I don't want, I think it's naive to say that even with all of those things that I support, that somehow the board meeting where we do eventually vote would be any less contentious. This is just a contentious issue, and it just is.
Please, we have listened, and now it's the board's meeting. If you wish to stay, you can listen, but please do not interrupt the meeting again. Are there any more comments?
Mrs. Cavill, I have one question. I was trying to listen. Did you say that that the policy should or should not be adopted without the procedures in writing?
No, I don't support putting procedure into policy.
No, not. What about in writing? I can understand not in the policy, but what about we don't vote until there are policies, until there are practices in
Are you
writing?
asking, do I need to see the procedures before I vote? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
I mean, we're not voting tonight.
No, I know. At some point in time, we're talking 30 days or
I
something.
would love to see the procedures.
Do you need to see the procedures before we vote?
I see it's a moot point, because I see it's very clearly going to be released. We are not having another meeting for a vote. We're talking about postponing the vote. So I don't understand why you need an answer to this question. It's a hypothetical scenario that's not happening.
I'm saying I can't make a vote without
But you're not being asked to vote.
Not right now. I'm going to be asked to vote.
You're going to have all the information very clearly before you vote, same as everybody else.
I would hope so.
Anything else on this? Did we want to provide clear direction for Dr. Cates tonight? Is that something you need, or do you understand what we expect?
That would be helpful. I understand you'd like to see the procedures, and we can do that certainly before the next meeting. Am I also hearing that people do not want to have a vote at the next meeting? I don't know if that's your call or my call or the board's call.
That is a question for the board to take.
Is that something that would need to be voted on, or is it just from a comment perspective that it would lay out the agenda for next month? Because I would like to see a postponement until the following board meeting before we would take this to a vote, to give the opportunity for the community to have additional time for input and feedback, and for us to consider it further. Because quite honestly, I haven't made up my mind yet, and I'm still listening to the community
and considering a variety of different things to make a decision.
And to just reemphasize Mr. Rosenblum's point, I don't believe that he would support a policy without the definition of what the non-discriminating coordinator would be. So there may need to be an edit to this policy before the next time we see it. At least that's the way I understood it.
So
So I'd like to see procedures and how this is going to be implemented. And I would like to Mr. Dombrowski's point, I'd like to see some further definitions contained within the policy itself, as Mr. Kramer had identified as well.
I want to be clear, you'd like a definition of the person, like the coordinator or whatever, and it sounds like you want a definition of gender identity, is that true?
Correct. Okay. And in looking at some other policies and other school districts, there's some very, very well-defined definitions.
Because we got so many, would it be helpful if you shared exactly what you like?
Sure, I'll take a look at them.
I'm just saying to try if we have all this due diligence to do, and it sounds like if we're only postponing a month, I'm just worried with this and the budget process and the fact that we're looking for a new superintendent's a lot on the table at the moment. So I just want to make sure that, first of all, are we all comfortable with the 1 month delay, knowing the timing of this, and then two, want to make sure that we leave this meeting all knowing what we need in order to stick with whatever timeline we're going to set for ourselves tonight. That's all I'm concerned.
Sure.
I don't believe there should be a timeline. I apologize. I don't think there should be a timeline. We have to take care. If it takes 30 days, 60 days, 6 months, let's get this stuff done right.
The superintendent's going to provide us with procedures.
And we have tried to communicate to people everywhere so that they know what's going to happen at the meeting. And I just want to make sure that, when we do that, that I can safely say to them, no, we will not be voting at the next meeting. That's important to us, to make sure that the people who are going to speak to us know what is or isn't. We've told them it wouldn't happen till next month, and if that's changed, I would like to communicate that to everyone.
So my understanding is you would like this to go back to the committee and make some changes on the policy for us to be able to review as a board then, along with the procedure that we'll get from Dr. Cates.
So we should see a revised policy before it comes up for a vote. I think it would be extremely irresponsible to make a bunch of changes and then bring it to the board for a vote.
Agreed.
True.
So October does not seem like the meeting that we would receive something vote-worthy, but it might be the revised policy with some of the caveats that Mr. Rosenblum and Mr. Kramer are seeking. So it could still be on the agenda, but just not ready for a vote.
Sure. So with regard to that type of stuff, in all the time I've been on the policy committee, it's always striving to follow in principle what you suggested. Effectively less is more in general. The general concept.
I'll give you what I'd like.
That serves everyone well, because then the community can hold the board accountable for what it's responsible for, the policy. And all the procedures are what the superintendent is responsible for, and that's what we hold him responsible for. So I only express this concern that I'm happy to take the policy back and review it again in committee. But the thought of adding something to it to further tie something down in a policy, I don't see that as being very beneficial, and in fact, in the long run, see that as being more destructive. But I have no problem with whatever the procedures are that Dr. Cates articulates, making all those available to anyone who, wants to see what they are. So I just express my concern to understand what we might add to the policy, where in fact, it would be less concerning if someone said they wanted to add something to the procedures, or they expected to see this but didn't, and that was a concern for them. I think that would be useful for the superintendent to get that feedback. So, still happy to take the policy back to the committee.
So it's my understanding that no vote next month. The public discussions will be available. We're going to inform the community that there's not going to be a vote, that will be postponed. I wouldn't give a time frame, okay? But it's not a next meeting. Public comments are still desired.
So, just in regard to that, the public comment will go on this issue forever, and people will not all agree. So I'm not in favor of indefinitely postponing, but to postpone to a date in the future, I think is a better approach. It will never end.
And perhaps to avoid some of the proposals at the beginning of this evening's meeting, maybe, I don't know if now would be a good time to perhaps discuss parameters around the community, the citizen appearances at next month's meeting?
Before we get to that, let's define, we're going to postpone the policy, next visit to the board table, to what board meeting or date? Or you don't support doing that at all, I understand that.
I'm sorry, what don't I support?
Making a specific date.
Right, I don't think,
Bring it
I
up.
think it's premature to say we're going to do it then, we're going to do it now.
I mean, logic dictates that the first time we'd be able to vote would be in November, because I agree with Mr. Dombrowski, we need to have a reading of the policy, should be public discussion if that's ready as amended in October, and then take a vote in the following meeting. So I would say November. I suppose I would consider December, but I don't see any benefit in waiting any longer than that. Again, I've already made my feelings about this known.
I would agree with Ms. Cavill, either November or December, and the debate will go on, no matter what. So we do need to have an end.
Yeah, I totally agree with that too, because otherwise it'll go on forever.
So I'm fine with targeting November. Should for any reason we think it needs to be prolonged further, we can, again, bring it up at next month's meeting. Leave that flexibility and opportunity for us to make an additional timeline if we need to. But
Again,
not next month.
Maybe to expedite the process, it's something where the policy committee is open, more than just 2 board members are there, and the discussion and all of the work within that committee, it becomes a working committee versus a rough shot at a bullseye that, may or may not hit the boxes that we as a whole would require in order to pass something. That's the intent, but
If that's what you want to do, is just have a special board meeting dedicated to that.
I'm fine with that.
When would that occur? Because, let's be honest, we've got board meetings, we've got extra board meetings for the superintendent, so I'm not complaining about any of this, but I want to know where in the schedule this might happen.
Well, you do it on one of the days that we set aside for superintendent interviews that we're not going to use for that, I guess. I would say that's the easiest one because we have all those days blocked out.
Okay.
Is that what people want to do?
I'm not certain I'm comfortable with that, because we had a number of policies that were given to us. We knew that this was taking place. We knew that the policy was coming forward. Somebody should have submitted something in writing.
I had no idea you guys were taking this to committee. The last time we met, we were just going to be presenting policies. I don't know when it jumped from board, here's some sample policies in surrounding communities to let's hash this out in committee and then bring it to the board. Do you recall that?
Not exactly, but you received, you got the policy. We got
I
the
did.
policy. You should have contacted us.
I had no
Contacted
idea you
Bob.
guys were going to put this in committee. How could I contact you to object to
No, I'm
something
saying
going to
the
committee?
policy that was in our board package.
Right.
A quick call to the board president.
Regarding what?
The policy that you
To
had
discuss
concerns with it.
That's
and
okay.
you had specific information.
We're here, everyone knows, if you had feedback on the policy, it's been on the agenda since it was posted.
Right.
The committee for policy meets all the time. Nobody
Where are the
necessarily
dates
knows
for
when
that
it is.
meeting?
So
I don't believe that it's shared with the rest of the board, the policy committee meeting dates.
I don't think it has a set date.
it's not. When there's something to review, we get an email, we schedule a meeting, and we meet. Otherwise, there's no reason to meet. But regardless, we have it here. You prepared for the meeting. You didn't have any suggestions to offer concretely to make a change, but we're going to reconsider, and presumably everyone can provide all that feedback and come prepared for we'll have a committee of the whole meeting, something to that effect, on one of the dates that's scheduled for superintendent stuff.
So I have a comment on this. First of all, today was the reading of a policy. It was not this is the policy, let's vote on it. So the fact that we received this policy in advance gave me an opportunity to take a look at it. This is also something I was greatly looking forward towards, to get community input on what we were presented. Now the fact that we've heard some community input, we've had some conversation, there's going to be more opportunity for that, gives us an opportunity to further explore revisions to the policy. I think having a special board meeting that may not be required for people who don't want to participate or may not be available, but for those of us who are, to have conversation around revising this policy. If it's a policy committee meeting that's open to all of us, to be able to have that working discussion and make revisions to this, and take all of the community's thoughts into consideration, I think is something that's worthwhile.
Can we have more than 2 board members at the policy committee meeting?
Yeah, just have to.
We just have to
post it.
record it and post it. Okay, so then as soon as the committee meeting, policy committee can set a date and time.
Well, we're going to do it on one of the scheduled dates for superintendent interviews that we're not going to use for that purpose. Right. We've already blocked out the schedule for that.
I'm getting lost.
And how much time and I guess it would be good to have some input ahead of time, being able to draft something and then have the conversation in regards to it. If we come with 7 different items, I don't know how long we can sit and hash it out, in all honesty.
I was confused. I heard special board meeting.
Whenever we have more than 2 people, then we're under another category. And so to have the committee of the whole board working on it would require a special board meeting. The board has set aside 5 dates. They're listed in the superintendent search report that list the 5 potential dates that people have held. And so far, I don't know how many the board will want for those, but if you have any -2 of them, let's say, those dates would be held in everyone's calendar that you could potentially use for the purpose of this policy.
I don't know what a special board meeting looks like, or an emergency board meeting. Is a quorum necessary at a special board meeting?
It's a board meeting. It's just one that's not regularly scheduled.
Okay, so if I can't make it, I don't want my presence, that I couldn't make it for other reasons, not.
We don't take any action. There's no action taken.
Okay. Is it recorded? Are there minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a formal meeting.
And
it would just be dedicated for the purpose
The
of
proposal
this issue.
would be to have a special board meeting on one of the days which we have set aside already. Okay, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, so superintendent's going to provide procedures. Superintendent's going to facilitate a special board meeting, presumably on one of the dates set aside for superintendent search.
I guess I would like to see us set a time limit on it.
A time limit on bringing a completed policy.
A time limit on our discussion.
A time limit on the committee of the whole to discuss this
Committee of the whole, yes,
Sure.
discussion.
Because we can go for hours.
What time limit would you like?
I'd cap it at 90 minutes. 90 minutes, that's fair. I don't know if we'll use all 90 minutes, but that seems reasonable.
Okay.
Are we going to get the procedures to enforce or to implement the policy prior to that meeting then?
Drafted relative to what we have so far held in the policy. You can't really draft procedures without knowing what the governance is of our administrative implementation. So that's the box that I'm in. So I'm willing to draft everything for you, and I'm willing to provide that to you based on the policy that we shared with you tonight.
So you want to have the special meeting so that the board can provide you some parameters by which to base the procedures which you will draft? Is that correct?
I think the board is asking to see the procedures and what that would have looked like relative to this draft policy, and then to work from there to define what should the policy be flushed out possibly to include.
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought you needed the parameters from us before you were able to draft practices before.
Well, let's just call it out. If there is unrestricted access, that's a different procedure than if there is restricted access. And fundamentally, that is the bright line that we are continuing to bump into. And so I can draft procedures based on today's draft policy. We have them. Fundamentally, the difference in the procedure that we're going to implement is just that. Do we have a requirement for our students to change in the changing station? Fundamentally, they're no different. I just want to make sure that people understand that's you're going to see that bright line built into the procedure.
Right, and I think to some more extent, it's, and to Mr. Young's point, with the confusion regarding how the process plays out now with restricted access and what variation that would have if we do go to unrestricted access. So maybe it's a document that has track changes in it that just kind of shows us where the differentiation occurs when we change our adopted policy from the procedures that were in place and the consequences to procedures after a unrestricted policy access. And I think that will help alleviate a lot of the ambiguity in what our discussion is about.
A reconciliation of differences.
Correct.
Okay. All right, and then you said you wanted to schedule a date to ultimately bring this back, or do you want to schedule that date as part of our committee of the whole meeting again?
Can we go one step at a time and do step one before we commit to step two?
It feels like stalling to me, to be honest with you. Like, there's one thing about giving the most information possible, which I hugely support. I think giving as much time as we can dedicate, but it just feels like that's not going to make the vote any easier at the end of the day. And so I'm not saying that we all, not just you, all of us shouldn't have access to all this information. We should all the time that we need. But it's not going to make the vote any easier at the end of the day. And so, again, there's no benefit in just waiting interminably for something to happen. We have to take a vote at the end of the day.
And I don't think we're stalling if we're scheduling a special board meeting. I think we're actually expediting and with the intention of having this done before November, with the intention that after 90 minutes of resolving these things and tweaking them so that the majority of this board is in support of this policy is fair. And I can't imagine that after a special working session there would need to be an extension beyond that. I mean, whatever comes out of that time-limited discussion will be what will come to the board more than likely for a reading and a vote. I agree. Out of order, right.
So from a timeline perspective, here's my thought. Special board meeting before the next board meeting, right? Those are the dates that we have available, correct? They're all before the next board meeting.
Correct.
We have that special board meeting. It's a board meeting specifically to discuss and address a potential revision to the policy. Out of that meeting will come a recommended draft. It will then again be presented for a reading at the October meeting. It will be presented to the public. The public will have an opportunity, as they did this month, to give input in a variety of different ways, and not that they're going to wait, but give input, and give input in the meeting in October. Then we consider to have a vote on the presented policy that was read in October at the November meeting. Does that sound like a reasonable time frame to everyone?
Yes.
So it sounds reasonable now, but think.
It's still open for flexibility, right? Just right now, this is a timeline that we should proceed with, and if we need to make a change, we'll make a change later.
Does that allow the administration of time to develop their policies and revisions?
Thank you for the question. Yes, it does.
Thank you for protecting us.
Okay, procedures, committee of the whole meeting, reconciliation of the differences, scheduled for the November meeting as of now. Okay, if there's nothing else here, next item is our proposed policy for graduation requirements. Any questions here?
I just had one quick one. We're not providing any more credit for music, is that correct? Or did I misunderstand what I read?
It's a good question, and it's cleanup from stuff that happened before. Actually, this is a limiting thing that we don't limit credit for music. And we don't know exactly why the phrase was in there, so we want to make sure we pull it out so that we don't limit credit for music.
Okay, that's the only thing that kind of stood out.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have the response to request for information, solar energy panel. We have a suggested motion that the Board of Education authorize installation of a solar energy system at the Higgins Education Center by GRNE Solar in the amount of $50,000 and apply for the applicable solar energy renewable credits and comment rebates.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion here.
One quick question, was there, I don't recall, a length of time for return on investment, it costs 50 grand, when are we going to recoup that, and when are we going to start making money?
Yes, we do.
It's a 10-year payback.
All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Ms. Cavill?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye.
Mr. Kramer?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre?
Aye. Next, we have transactions involving treasury securities. Suggested motion that the Board of Education adopt the attached resolution to authorize Barbara Peterson as school treasurer of Township High School District 211 to act in all transactions relating to United States Treasury securities held in the name of Township High School District 211 and/or in the name of Schaumburg Township Board of School Trustees.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion here.
Do we have any, I know there's $3,500, is that correct? Do we have any earmark for that fund? Would it just go into the general fund?
Yes, it would just be deposited to the general.
Is it possible that the board take this unanticipated revenue and make a contribution to the Realtors Against Homelessness? Would anybody object to that?
I object to that.
Okay.
Yeah. I have no problem with Realtors Against Homelessness, and I have no problem with our foundation. But of all things, I'm kind of surprised with the way we want to scrutinize district finances. District finances are subject to the policies and procedures of the board and the operations run by the superintendent, and all money that comes in from the taxpayer or belongs to the taxpayer needs to stay there. We should not go about making charitable contributions on behalf of the taxpayer. It's enough to expect them to fund our public education here.
And if we didn't claim these funds and authorize this, it would just remain with the Treasury and get absorbed by the federal government? Is that correct?
We would not have them. I don't know what would happen to it, but
Okay. All right, thank you. I appreciate the thought and suggestion, even though I oppose doing it. Thank you. Any other questions here? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Klimkowitz? Aye. Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mr. Kramer?
Aye.
Ms. Cavill?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye. Next, we have the 2019 tax levy introduction. Comments or questions here? Pardon me?
Not at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And next, that will bring us to AT&T settlement and release agreement. We have a suggested motion that the Board of Education authorize the superintendent or designee to approve the settlement and release agreement with AT&T in the amount of $165,000 to resolve the billing discrepancies as presented. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion here. Just to clear this up because it's not readily apparent here, but the $165,000 is money that's coming back to the district, not money going to AT&T.
that is correct.
And that's in the form of credit.
Yes.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Kramer?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Ms. Cavill?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye. Next, we have board member expenses. Suggested motion that the Board of Education approve the pre-approval form for future expense reimbursement for Ms. Klimkowitz to attend the IASB North Cook Division dinner meetings on October 16, 2019 and March 18, 2020, and Stephen Rosenblum to attend the IASB North Cook Division dinner meeting on October 16, 2019 as presented. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call, please.
Ms. Cavill?
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mr. Kramer?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye, that motion carries. Next, we have a resolution authorizing the sale of school district property located at 12 North 475 Burner Drive, Elgin. Suggested motion that the Board of Education adopt the resolution as presented and engage Cindy Ike as the listing agent for the sale of the district-owned residential property located at 12 North 475 Burner Drive, Elgin. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion here. Roll call, please.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mr. Kramer?
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye.
Ms. Cavill?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye. We have potential topics for future discussion. Anyone?
I think we should revisit our 22-year-old policy regarding public commenting.
Very good. If you want to put that one up on the policy committee, and if people have comments, why don't you just go ahead and write them up and email the superintendent, and then we can take a good first crack. All right, if nothing else, that'll bring us to committee reports. First, we have Northwest Suburban Special Education Organization. Ms. Klimkowitz.
Okay, we met September 3rd, and our shining star was from Sunrise Lake Outdoor Education Center, a young man from District 214 who has come a long way. So he was recognized for all of the work that he's done there. We also received a donation from IASBO to NSSEO from the association there. We discussed the mini grant applications were going out this September. Previously, there have been about 30,000 in grants that were received. The playground at Minor, they have some plans in regards to it. There was a large grant from the state, and they're also seeking support from Arlington Heights Park District to make the playground truly handicap accessible or accessible to all of the students, offering a variety of different opportunities for them. The IDEA grants were approved, and the NSSEO board is going to start using Word docs. So it'll make it a lot easier for them. I have the annual report for Sunrise. I can bring this to our next meeting and pass it around if people would like to see it. So that was it.
All right, next we have Ed Red.
Okay, as far as Ed Red, they had the kickoff luncheon today. The topics that are going to be coming up are in regards to property tax, TIF reform. Ed Red has hosted meetings to testify, or will be hosting a meeting September 25th to testify before the TIF subcommittee hearing. They're looking at maybe tightening some of the eligibility factors and some additional guidelines in regards to the TIFs. They also talked about consolidation, and Ed Red is involved in providing information to the committee. Some of the data analysis that they received is in regards to administrator salaries, and one of the points made was that the admin salaries may not provide the savings that some people believe that they would if consolidation occurred. They also talked about a data analysis for reserves or days of the cash on hand, and just to kind of remember that there's really no size that fits all policy in regards to school district. Each one does something a little different. Lauren was there also at the lunch and may be able to add something also. They reiterated that Ed Red's role is advocate, inform, and engage. They also talked about Perkins 5 state plan, which is the career and technical education funding, and Ed Red is going to have a listening tour in regards to that. And there's probably some guidelines as when we apply for the various fundings. Ed Red is going to have some various committees as they did this prior year. One will be on finances, another on a review of the mandates that have been imposed on school districts, and something called Practitioner Legislative Action Team. And that would be for the director of Ed Red to be able to call somebody at the last minute who they have as their go-to person to get updates on legislative issues. So they're looking to have volunteers participating on those. The state superintendent, Dr. Carmen Ayala, she spoke. She talked about they're looking at the report cards. They are also looking at the Perkins 5 and the recruitment of teachers and something towards the international teacher recruitment to get more input here and addressing some of the teacher shortages. They also talked about updating the website. It's going to have more information on the legislators and how to reach them. The monthly calendar will be updated. There will be contact forms for members, and each district will have their own password and login. So I'm not exactly certain how all that will work. I don't know if Lauren has anything else to add.
No, I think that was a great summary.
Okay, that was it. Thank you.
Very good. Next we have Partners for Our Community, and Mr.
I can offer some comment for you, the board. The team met most recently on Monday afternoon. We're just a little more than a month into the new school year, and so the program is ramping up with the fall as it progresses. The ESL programming for adults is the strongest element here in the early stages. It continues to grow in participation. There's also some early conversation about developing a program partnership with the Schaumburg Township Library that would be coordinated out of the evening program at the Youth Center.
Thank you. And next will be Facilities Committee, Mr. Young and Mr. Dombrowski.
Yeah, on September 9th, Mr. Dombrowski and I met with staff, and we discussed some of the projects that are taken care of this year, such as the Higgins solar panels and the Higgins thing, and the last football field in Kona done. And I believe, was there anything else you remember?
Yeah, mechanical units that they've been having trouble with now that they want to replace.
Yeah.
Potentially, in that space, but.
Which school was it?
It was Conan, I believe, right? Yep. And then also just discussing some options with extended warranties. I know that the state will push for extended roof warranties, and considering that our roofs run 30 to 40 years, it might make sense to purchase an extended warranty since we maintain them so well, and we might be able to get a little more value out of that versus just constantly doing our own maintenance and exceeding the warranties.
All right, that will bring us to the Budget and Finance Committee meeting. We didn't have any meetings since the last board meeting, but if you look in the write-up here, we have the schedule, I believe, that was requested, and the proposed time of 7:30 for all of the upcoming half a dozen meetings, along with the proposed topics. Finally, Booster Club presidents, Mr. Rosenblum.
The Booster Club presidents and co-presidents met on Monday, September 9th in the evening at our district office. Dr. Cates was there, as well as a couple of other leaders from our district administration. It was a wonderful opportunity for the 5 school booster clubs to really come together and share best practices, share some of the challenges that they've had as individuals, and really learn from each other. They talked about business operations and financing, how best to manage their money, how they should manage their money, but also opportunities for fundraising. There was some discussion around their names. There are a couple of schools that have names that one school loves their name and another school wants to change their name to that school's name for better recognition of what their programs are all about. And so it was really a great conversation. They also were able to talk about, for instance, there's some craft fairs coming up at a couple of our schools. And one of our schools' craft fair is being promoted on the electronic marquee at another one of our schools. So there was some surprise there, and it was like, how'd you do that? So even sharing between each other, some communication, being able to maybe promote some of their fundraising across the schools to better support the programs that they have. It was really terrific. Also, being the liaison to the booster clubs, I'm getting a better appreciation for what they do and actually looking for ways that I can support them. And I encourage everybody in the community and on the board to do that. For instance, the Hoffman Estates Music Parents Association had a fundraiser at Chipotle the other night. The line was out the door nonstop. And I could tell everybody had Hoffman Estates shirts on, so I know why they were there, and they were all handing out their flyers. And it was great to see all the parent booster clubs at the open houses, both recruiting people, and I see this at the football games too, but also handing out membership information and cards and things that they're entitled to as members. So it was really a great opportunity for us to come together as a parent booster kind of district. And I look forward to continuing to do that and supporting them throughout the next year.
Thank you. Next, we have our upcoming events calendar. And then finally, closed session. We have a suggested motion that the board will enter closed session to discuss minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, matter relating to an individual student, and probable or imminent litigation against, affecting, or on behalf of the public body. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Cavill.
Aye.
Mr. Kramer.
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski.
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre.
Aye. All right, we have a suggested motion that the board return to open session.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Cavill.
Aye.
Mr. Kramer.
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski.
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum.
Aye.
Mr. Young. Aye. Mr. Lefevre.
Aye. We have a suggested motion that the Board of Education accepts the retirement requests of Alfredo Siguenza, effective June 2020, according to the master contract of the District 211 Operations and Maintenance Group.
Karen Stevens, effective December 2020, consistent with the master contract of the District 211 United Support Staff. Robert Such, effective December 2022, consistent with the master contract of the United Support Staff. And James Well, effective June 2020, according to the master contract of the District 211 Operations and Maintenance Group.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Kramer.
Aye.
Ms. Klimkowitz.
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski.
Aye.
Ms. Campbell.
Aye.
Mr. Young. Aye. Mr. Rosenblum.
Aye.
Mr. LaFever.
Aye. We have a suggested motion that employee Aaron Lombard be suspended for 4 days without pay. Further, that the board secretary notify said employee in writing of this action by the Board of Education.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Campbell.
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum.
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski.
Aye.
Mr. Young. Aye. Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Aye.
Mr. Kramer.
Aye.
Mr. LaFever.
Aye. And before we adjourn, just to recap for everybody, we have our schedule set aside for candidate interviews that will be on days October 2, October 7, October 14, and October 15. The fifth day, which was October 10, is for the superintendent to make arrangements for us to have our committee of the whole meeting regarding the policy that we plan to discuss. The policy meeting will begin at 7:30, and the candidate interview meetings, for now at least, on 2 and 7, we know for sure will begin at 6 o'clock. The 14 and 15 we could work out later, but you can plan for 6 o'clock unless you know different. Everyone's agrees that that's what we agreed to do, and everyone's aware.
Concur.
Okay, very good. If there's nothing else, we are adjourned. There's
you
some
have to sign
signature stuff
For
here.
the budget.
Go ahead. We're adjourned.